Chapter 701. When the two of them entered, Qin Feiyang's gaze locked onto the person in front of him. This person was only a 5-star combat emperor. It could be said that he was insignificant. However, the aura he exuded was like that of a king. It was impossible to ignore him. Most importantly, Qin Feiyang felt a very familiar aura from this person. It was a faintly discernible aura of an emperor. Without a doubt, the person in front of him was the current first prince of the Great Qin Empire. At the same time, the first prince was also sizing up Qin Feiyang. At first, it was purely out of curiosity, but gradually, a trace of suspicion crept into his eyes. Why did this Qin Feiyang give him an inexplicable sense of familiarity? Déjà vu? The person behind him entered the room and immediately turned around to close the door. Then he took off his mask. Who else could it be but Zhuge Mingyang? He looked at Qin Feiyang and cupped his hands. Brother Qin, we meet again. Qin Feiyang stood up and nodded with a smile. Yes, it seems like fate has brought us together. This is... After saying that, he looked at the first prince. Zhuge Mingyang walked to the first prince's side and introduced him. This is His Highness the First Prince. Your Highness, this is Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's expression changed. He quickly cupped his hands and said, So it's His Highness the First Prince. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Brother Qin, what are you saying? It's rather impudent of me to come uninvited. I hope Brother Qin doesn't mind. The first prince smiled. As he spoke, he took off his mask, revealing a handsome face with a faint smile. Qin Feiyang couldn't be more familiar with this face. Because, when Qin Feiyang was expelled from the imperial capital, the first prince was already 17 or 18 years old. His facial features were almost fixed. Therefore, after all these years, his appearance didn't change much. He could be recognized at a glance. But could the first prince recognize him? If he recognized him, how would he react? Qin Feiyang's current mood was somewhat complicated. He hated this person from the bottom of his heart. But no matter what, this person was still his half-brother. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was not saying anything, the first prince frowned. He glanced at Lu Hong and asked with a smile, Is it inconvenient for Brother Qin right now? If so, then I will bid my farewells first. If there is another chance, I will come and visit Brother Qin again. No. Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand and said with a faint smile, It's fate that brought us together. Your Highness, there's no need to be so polite. Please sit. Then I won't stand on ceremony. The first prince laughed loudly and strode into the tea room. He nodded at Lu Hong and sat down on a chair. Zhuge Mingyang also walked into the tea room, but he did not take a seat. He chose to stand beside the great prince. Qin Feiyang squinted his eyes and said with a smile, Brother Zhuge, there are seats here. Why are you standing? If others see you like this, they will definitely talk behind my back and say that I am not a good host. The first prince added, That's right, Brother Zhuge. There are no outsiders here. Let's sit down and talk. All right. Zhuge Mingyang looked at Qin Feiyang meaningfully and sat beside the first prince. Qin Feiyang laughed and casually sat across from the two. He waved his hand and said, Lu Hong, pour tea for them. Okay. Lu Hong walked to the tea table and picked up the teapot. She took out 2 clean teacups, filled them with tea, and pushed them in front of the first prince and Zhuge Mingyang. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Your Highness, Brother Zhuge, I heard from the waiter that this is the best tea in the fragrant Moon Inn. Help me taste it. Did he lie to me? Zhuge Mingyang picked up the teacup and sniffed it. He then put it to his mouth and took a sip. After tasting it carefully for a while, Zhuge Mingyang put down the teacup and said with a smile, He did not lie to you. This is indeed the best tea in the fragrant Moon Inn. Qin Feiyang asked curiously, Then may I ask, what is the name of this tea? The name of the tea? Zhuge Mingyang was stunned. He had thought that Qin Feiyang would ask about the purpose of their visit. He did not expect that he would ask some unimportant questions. Qin Feiyang said with some disappointment, Brother Zhuge, you don't know? Of course I know. This tea is called fragrant dew tea. The tea leaves are personally grown by the fragrant Moon Inn. The water used to make this tea is also the dew that the fragrant Moon Inn collects from the morning flowers in the wild. Therefore, this tea has a faint floral fragrance. When you taste it carefully, you will find a hint of sweetness. Zhuge Mingyang explained. No wonder it tastes so good. It is made from the dew of the flowers. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. He picked up the teacup and took another sip. He revealed an intoxicated expression and said with a smile, Lu Hong, when you have time, go to the wild and collect some dew of the flowers. Lu Hong looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang and nodded. Okay. She also did not understand. What was Qin Feiyang playing at? The first prince, who was standing at the side, also had a hint of impatience on his face. Qin Feiyang, on the other hand, looked relaxed. He put down the teacup and said to Lu Hong, Go and tell the waiter to prepare some good wine and dishes. I want to entertain the first prince and brother Zhuge well. Okay. Lu Hong responded and turned to walk out of the room. The first prince frowned and stretched out his hand. Miss, wait a moment. What? Lu Hong turned and looked at him in confusion. The first prince was about to speak when Zhuge Mingyang transmitted his voice to him. Your Highness, don't be rash. Heard about it. The first prince was slightly taken aback, but he did not ask Zhuge Mingyang the reason. He smiled at Lu Hong and said, I can't hold my liquor very well. Bring less wine. Okay. Lu Hong nodded in response, then turned and walked out. After Lu Hong left, the first prince looked at Zhuge Mingyang in confusion. With this person's intelligence, it is impossible for him not to know the purpose of our visit. However, he avoided talking about it. It is clear that he is competing with us in patience. Zhuge Mingyang secretly explained. Competing with us in patience? The first prince was even more puzzled. I know what your Highness is thinking. Don't worry. He definitely wants to be on good terms with you. Otherwise, he would not have asked us to stay for a drink. If my guess is correct, on one hand, he wants to use this time to get to know us better. On the other hand, he probably wants to seize the initiative, because whoever speaks first will lose the initiative. Zhuge Mingyang secretly said. So that's how it is. The first prince was suddenly enlightened. He could not help but secretly rejoice that he had brought a think tank with him. Otherwise, if he had come alone, he would definitely not have been able to hold himself back and speak first. Qin Feiyang could also tell that the two were secretly communicating, so he did not say anything and just quietly drank his tea. After listening to Zhuge Mingyang's explanation, the first prince fell silent for a while, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked with a smile, Brother Qin, did my 13th brother come to make trouble for you again? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He put down his teacup and said, If your Highness had not mentioned it, I would have forgotten about one thing. What is it? Both of them looked at him suspiciously. Just before you came, 2 black-robed men came to find me. They said that they were your Highness's guards and wanted to take me to the imperial palace. Qin Feiyang said. There's such a thing? The first prince raised his eyebrows. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, So I want to ask if your Highness sent anyone. Absolutely not. The first prince shook his head. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Then that's strange. Who would have the guts to impersonate your Highness? This, the first prince looked at Zhuge Mingyang. Zhuge Mingyang pondered for a while and said, I think it should be the 13th prince. Why do you say that? The first prince frowned. Because Brother Qin offended him. He wants to get rid of Brother Qin. But he's not completely confident, so he impersonated your Highness. If he fails, Brother Qin won't think it was him, and will only come to you. In other words, he's trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and drive a wedge between you and Brother Qin. Zhuge Mingyang said. Heard about it. Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed. He had guessed the 13th prince's intention. This person was indeed worthy of being the #1 genius of the imperial capital. Bastard. However, the first prince was furious. He actually dared to scheme against him. He really didn't know the meaning of death. Your Highness, please calm down. You can't fall out with the 13th prince without any evidence. Zhuge Mingyang advised. Brother Zhuge is right. If you fall out with him now, the 13th prince will definitely accuse you of trying to get rid of him to stabilize your position as the crown prince. Although you have a clear conscience, others won't think so and will think that it's only right. At that time, it will definitely have a negative impact on you. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Zhuge Mingyang smiled and said, Brother Qin, you really hit the nail on the head. I admire you. Qin Feiyang said, I was just saying. Your Highness and Brother Zhuge, don't take it too seriously. Just a casual remark? Zhuge Mingyang shook his head disapprovingly. He transmitted his voice to the first prince. Your Highness, don't be fooled by him. Although he has just entered the imperial capital, he has already seen through the conflicts between the various factions. The first prince was in disbelief. The private disputes between the various princes had existed for many years, and they could be said to be intertwined. Even those who lived in the imperial capital might not know about it. However, this person had only been in the imperial capital for a month, and had already seen through it. His mind was indeed not simple. The first prince became even more excited. Such a talent must be brought under his command. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Brother Qin, you don't have to care about the 13th prince. Do I dare to not care? He's a high and mighty prince and I'm just a poor commoner. It's too easy for him to deal with me. Qin Feiyang sighed. Who said so? As long as Brother Qin is willing. From today onwards, Brother Qin, you are an honored guest of mine. At that time, he won't dare to do anything to you. The first prince harumphed. At the same time, he was officially inviting Qin Feiyang. He still can't keep his cool. Zhuge Mingyang sighed. However, he couldn't blame the first prince. This person's performance was too outstanding. No matter who it was, they couldn't wait to bring him under their command. Chapter 702. The two princes looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. They were quite confident in the price they had offered. The reason for that was because the VIP represented the most respected person in the world. It had an extraordinary significance, especially since the first prince was the current crown prince of the Great Qin Empire. This made the words guest of honor even more meaningful. So, in their opinion, Qin Feiyang had no reason to refuse. But Qin Feiyang did not say anything. At this moment, Lu Hong pushed the door open and entered. Behind Lu Hong there were more than a dozen waiters. Everyone held a tray in their hands, and on the tray were various kinds of dishes. Seeing this, the first prince and Zhuge Mingyang hurriedly turned their heads away, not wanting to be recognized by the waiters. After the dishes were served, Lu Hong ordered the waiters to leave and close the door. Qin Feiyang also stood up and smiled. Let's talk while we eat. With that, he walked towards the dining table. The first prince was at a loss and turned to look at Zhuge Mingyang. Don't worry. This person did not directly refuse, which means that he is still considering. Zhuge Mingyang said telepathically. The first prince heaved a sigh of relief and asked in a low voice. Then do you want to add some other benefits? Zhuge Mingyang said. Then tell me first, what can you add? The first prince said, for example, wealth treasures? Your Highness, you think too simply of him. He can even refine such a heaven-defying pill like the potential pill. Would he lack these things? Zhuge Mingyang shook his head and smiled. Then what should we do? The first prince frowned and was a little angry. This person seemed to be shrouded in a mysterious veil, making people unable to see through him from beginning to end. Let's drink with him first. Zhuge Mingyang stood up and retreated to the side with a smile. Your Highness, please. The first prince glanced at him, stood up, and strode into the dining room. Qin Feiyang stood beside the dining table and stretched out his hand. Please sit. The two of them smiled and sat down. Qin Feiyang did not hesitate to sit in the main seat. He smiled and said, Lu Hong, pour the wine. Lu Hong obediently picked up the wine jug and filled the wine cups in front of the three people. Qin Feiyang lifted his wine cup and looked at the first prince and prince. He smiled and said, This is my first time here and I'm fortunate enough to be acquainted with the two of you. In the future, I hope that the two of you can take care of me. The first prince smiled. Look at what you're saying. With Brother Qin's ability, do you still need us to take care of you? Yeah. We should be the ones who need to be taken care of in the future. Zhuge Mingyang smiled faintly. No. Of the two of you, one is the crown prince of the empire, and the other was once known as the #1 genius in the imperial capital. To be able to meet the two of you is my honor. I'll drink first as a sign of respect. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he drained the wine cup in one gulp. The first prince and the first prince looked at each other, and also finished the wine in their cups. Subsequently, Zhuge Mingyang put down his wine cup and said with a smile, "Brother Qin, you're too well informed. You know my background so quickly." Qin Feiyang said, "I don't have any hobbies. I just like to ask around. Brother Zhuge, please don't laugh at me." No. Zhuge Mingyang hurriedly waved his hand and asked with a smile, "I wonder what else Brother Qin has heard." "Nothing much. But there's one person that I find very interesting," Qin Feiyang said. "Who is it?" Zhuge Mingyang asked. "The current 14th prince," Qin Feiyang said calmly, while paying attention to the expressions of the two people. The result did not disappoint him. Hearing this name, the expressions of the two people clearly changed. "According to what I've heard, this 14th prince's talent is extraordinary. He's even better than Brother Zhuge. Logically speaking, such a person should be very famous now. But why haven't I heard of him in the Divine Hall before?" Qin Feiyang looked at the two people suspiciously. Zhuge Mingyang glanced at the first prince and remained silent. The first prince's expression was also uncertain. In the end he said with a smile, "This isn't a secret. There's no harm in telling Brother Qin. My 14th brother is indeed extraordinary. But more than 10 years ago, Father suddenly ordered his cultivation to be abolished, and he was expelled from the imperial capital. Now he might be somewhere, living the life of an ordinary person. It's also possible that he has died at a young age." The first prince sighed. There was a touch of unconcealable pain and regret on his face. "It's really a pity that a blazing sun of a generation has fallen like this. Sigh. But I don't understand." When Qin Feiyang said this, he suddenly stopped. He looked at the first prince and asked, "I wonder if I should ask the next question?" The first prince said, "Just say it." "Then I'll say it. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. Why did the current emperor do this?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. On the surface, Qin Feiyang was purely curious, but in his heart he was very nervous. This question had puzzled him for more than 10 years. So he wanted to find the answer from the first prince. But in the end he was disappointed. The first prince shook his head. "To tell the truth, I've always been puzzled about this matter." "That's right. I clearly remember that the 14th prince became a 9-star martial master when he was only 10 years old. Many old antiques in the world praised him endlessly, and the emperor doted on him even more. My title as the #1 monster of the imperial capital was stolen by him. But no one could have imagined that it would end in such a tragedy. This might be the so-called, the heavens are jealous of geniuses." Zhuge Mingyang sighed deeply. "The heavens are jealous of geniuses?" Qin Feiyang inwardly sneered. Even if he was beaten to death, he didn't believe that the emperor would make a move on him for no reason. There had to be a great secret hidden in this matter. At this moment, the first prince's face turned solemn. "Brother Qin, this topic ends here. What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Brother Qin, you might not know. My father had already issued a gag order more than 10 years ago. No one is allowed to mention this matter. Anyone who violates this order will be killed without mercy. So from then on, my 14th brother is equivalent to a taboo in the imperial capital." The first prince said in a low voice. "He issued a gag order?" Qin Feiyang's heart suddenly burned with anger. Since he dared to do it, why would he be afraid of others talking behind his back? But there was no abnormality on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your reminder, Your Highness." After saying that, Qin Feiyang raised his wine cup again and said with a smile, "I'll propose another toast to the two of you." "You're welcome." The two of them smiled apologetically and raised their wine cups. Next, the three of them drank and chatted casually. As for the guest of honor, Qin Feiyang did not mention a word. The first prince did mention it a few times, but Qin Feiyang cleverly changed the topic. Lu Hong was full of doubts. Wasn't the guest of honor what Qin Feiyang wanted? But why didn't he agree? What was he thinking? After 3 rounds of wine, dong. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The four of them immediately stopped talking and looked up at the door. Qin Feiyang was about to speak when the first prince hurriedly said, "Wait, let's leave for a moment." After saying that, he and Zhuge Mingyang got up and walked into the innermost bedroom. They stood behind a screen. Qin Feiyang smiled meaningfully and said, "Come in." The door was pushed open. Two black-clothed youths strode into the pavilion and closed the door behind them. Both of them were wearing masks. However, judging from their figures and auras, they should be Lin Dian and the 13th prince. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them and asked suspiciously, "Who are you?" The two of them took off their masks. Qin Feiyang quickly got up and cupped his hands. "So it's the 13th prince. Sorry for the disrespect. Don't be so polite." The 13th prince looked at him coldly and walked to the dining table. He saw two used wine cups on the table and frowned. "Are you greeting guests?" Qin Feiyang returned to his seat and nodded. "Yes. Who is it? Where are they now?" The 13th prince asked as he looked around the room suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, "They have already left. As for who they are, I have no comment." "Your Highness, is there anything you need from me?" Lin Dian frowned and said coldly. "Qin Feiyang, I'm telling you, don't be so arrogant." Qin Feiyang glanced at him and said, "I'm far inferior compared to you. Tell me, is there anything you need? If there's nothing else, please leave." "You." Lin Dian was furious and was about to turn hostile. However, at this moment, the 13th prince reached out his hand and stopped Lin Dian. He sat opposite Qin Feiyang and said, "Back at the temple, I was indeed a little rash. Please forgive me." "Ha." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "Your Highness, are you apologizing to me?" "If you say so, then so be it." The 13th prince's eyebrows furrowed in anger. Qin Feiyang smiled. "Since you're apologizing, shouldn't you be apologizing? After all, I don't owe you anything." Lin Dian clenched his hands and said gloomily, "His Highness has already given you enough face by apologizing to you personally. I advise you not to push your luck." "Who are you? Do you have the right to speak here? Do you have a big mouth? If that's the case, the door is behind you. I won't see you out." Qin Feiyang sneered and pointed at the door expressionlessly. "You're courting death." Lin Dian gritted his teeth and his face was extremely pale. "Shut up." The 13th prince turned to look at Lin Dian and shouted impatiently. "Yes." Lin Dian shrank his neck and replied respectfully. He then stood aside obediently. The 13th prince then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "I don't want to talk nonsense. I'm not here for the formula of the potential pill. I only hope that Brother Qin can cooperate with me." "Cooperate?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and said suspiciously, "You're a prince and I'm just a commoner. There's a huge difference between our statuses. What's there to cooperate with?" The sarcasm in his words was undisguised. The 13th prince could naturally tell. He suppressed his anger and said, "I believe Brother Qin has heard of this saying before. There are no eternal enemies in the world, only eternal benefits." "That's right." Qin Feiyang nodded. Chapter 703. "Really?" Qin Feiyang asked curiously. "Tell me about it." The 13th prince said, "As long as you cooperate with me, not only will I treat you as a guest, but I will also give you a prince token." "A prince token?" Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. Lin Dian also looked at the 13th prince in disbelief. At the same time, the first prince and Zhuge Mingyang, who were hiding behind the screen, were also in disbelief. Only Lu Hong had a suspicious look in her eyes. What was this prince token? How could it make Qin Feiyang lose his composure? "What do you think?" the 13th prince asked with a smile. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and smiled. "Your offer is indeed very tempting." Hearing this, the first prince's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Qin Feiyang was bought over by the 13th prince just like that? "No, I have to stop him," the first prince muttered, and was about to walk out from behind the screen. But suddenly, Zhuge Mingyang pressed on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry." The first prince said anxiously, "How can I not worry when you have already taken out the prince token?" "Listen to me." "That's right," Zhuge Mingyang said and lowered his head to listen to the conversation between Qin Feiyang and the 13th prince. After a while, Qin Feiyang said again, "But I believe that there is no free lunch in this world. Tell me your conditions. Help me open the door of potential and enter the Master of War as soon as possible. It's easy for you to do these things, isn't it?" The 13th prince said. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and he nodded. "It is indeed easy, but I don't understand why your highness is in such a hurry to enter the Master of War." The 13th prince frowned and said, "This is my private matter. You don't have to ask, do you?" Actually, your highness doesn't need to tell me. I can guess a thing or two. His highness is doing this because he wants to compete with the first prince for the throne. But according to the current trend, your highness definitely has no hope. That's because you can't compare to the first prince in terms of strength or background. Furthermore, the first prince has Zhuge Mingyang as his advisor. But if you take the lead and step into the War Master, then the situation might change. Your highness, don't you think I'm right? Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The 13th prince's pupils contracted. He had never thought that this person would be able to casually say what he was thinking. This insight, this sensitivity, it was simply too terrifying. However, Qin Feiyang had not only said these words to the 13th prince, but also to the first prince. He wanted to make the first prince feel pressured. At this moment, the first prince felt an unprecedented pressure. Zhuge Mingyang said telepathically, "Your Highness, now you know how terrifying this person is. We must get him." The first prince nodded. At this moment, the 13th prince said, "Since you've guessed it, then I won't say anything more. Just tell me, do you want to cooperate?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "This is not a game. I need some time to think about it." "Okay, I'll give you 3 days to think about it. Furthermore, if you can help me ascend to the throne, I promise that the position of the state teacher will be yours in the future." The 13th prince said. Damn it, he's really willing to go all out. The first prince cursed as killing intent surged in his eyes. Qin Feiyang looked meaningfully at the bedroom and nodded with a smile. "Okay, I'll give you an answer in 3 days. Then I won't disturb you any longer." The 13th prince was in a good mood. He stood up and cupped his hands before he put on his mask and left with Lin Dian. After the door was closed, the first prince hurriedly walked out and said, "Brother Qin, you can't agree to it." Qin Feiyang sighed. "To be honest, I really don't want to get involved in the dispute between you princes, but his offer is too tempting. I really can't refuse." The first prince fell silent. A prince token, a guest of honor, and the future state teacher. No one could refuse such a temptation. It was not Qin Feiyang's fault. It was his 13th brother's fault for being too willing to go all out. Zhuge Mingyang glanced at Qin Feiyang and said, "Your Highness, it's time to take out your final trump card." Final trump card. The first prince muttered. In the end, he gritted his teeth and took out a golden token. He handed it to Qin Feiyang with both hands and said, "Brother Qin, please accept it." This is... Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled when he saw the golden token. The token was the size of a baby's palm. It seemed to be made of gold and shone with a golden light. And on the front of the token was a golden divine dragon with no dragon claws. "Although I can't promise to make you the future state teacher, if I do become the emperor one day, I will repay Brother Qin with all my strength." The first prince said with sincerity. His meaning was clear. He wanted Qin Feiyang to assist him. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. "Your Highness already has Brother Zhuge to assist you. Do you still need me?" "Very much." The first prince nodded without hesitation. Zhuge Mingyang smiled and said, "Brother Qin, His Highness is the crown prince of a country. To be able to do this is already very sincere, so I hope that Brother Qin will not decline anymore." Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment before he smiled and said, "If that's the case, then this Qin will accept." As he spoke, he grabbed the golden token. The moment Qin Feiyang grabbed the golden token, the first prince and Zhuge Mingyang were overjoyed. Come, come, come. Let's drink until we're drunk." The first prince laughed heartily. Qin Feiyang was also beaming. After drinking a few cups, the first prince asked, "Brother Qin, who do you think poses the greatest threat to me in the current situation?" Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and smiled. In truth, they're all about the same. But as long as your highness is careful, the emperor's throne will be yours. That's exactly what I'm thinking. However, even a horse can make mistakes. I'm just afraid that they'll get something on me. After all, in the emperor's clan, even an insignificant matter can cause an uproar in the city. The first prince worriedly said. Qin Feiyang smiled. There's something that I don't know if I should say. The first prince smiled. We're all on the same side now, so there's no need to worry. There's no harm in speaking your mind. Actually, your highness can begin to remove some obstacles. The first prince and Zhuge Mingyang looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Wasn't clearing the obstacles the same as getting rid of the other princes? This was no small matter. The death of a prince would alarm the emperor, and the consequences would be unimaginable. This Qin understands your concerns, but as long as it's done cleanly, even the emperor himself might not be able to find anything. Qin Feiyang faintly smiled. The first prince hesitated, then shook his head. This matter is too important. I need to think about it. It's fine. I'm just giving a suggestion. But there's an old saying that I think I should say. A general builds his success on 10,000 bones. Qin Feiyang casually said. This highness will remember it. Let's not talk about it anymore. Come, let's drink a few cups. The first prince smiled. Wait. Qin Feiyang stretched out his hand. What's wrong? The first prince and Zhuge Mingyang looked at him in confusion. Since I've already agreed to assist your highness, this Qin naturally has to give you a gift. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he disappeared into thin air without a trace. The first prince was bewildered. Zhuge Mingyang's eyes flashed. He looked at Lu Hong and smiled. I heard that Brother Qin has a treasure that can hide you. It seems that it's true. Lu Hong only smiled and did not reply. The more one spoke, the more mistakes one would make. This Zhuge Mingyang was a shrewd person. If one was careless, he would be able to find a flaw. Thus, one might as well not say anything. Swish. Soon Qin Feiyang appeared again, holding a jade box in his hand. Your Highness, please accept this. Qin Feiyang placed the jade box in front of the first prince. The first prince looked at the jade box suspiciously. When he opened it, 6 elixirs entered his vision. The first prince looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Qin Feiyang grabbed one of the elixirs and smiled. This is the 9 Tunes Yellow Dragon Elixir. It has 5 elixir patterns, and can allow you to break through 5 minor realms at once. What? The moment he said that, both of them were dumbfounded and their hearts were in turmoil. Breaking through 5 minor realms at once? Heavens, was this a dream? Zhuge Mingyang smiled. Congratulations, Your Highness. As long as you consume this 9 Tunes Yellow Dragon Elixir, you'll be able to enter the Combat Master realm immediately. Really? The first prince's breathing quickened, and he found it hard to accept. Absolutely. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. Your Highness, you've seen these 3 potential elixirs before, so I won't explain further. As for these 2 elixirs, they're called potential elixirs and can unlock the gates of potential for level 4 and level 5. Heard about it. Once again, the first prince's heart was in turmoil. Where did Qin Feiyang find the elixir formulas for these elixirs? Zhuge Mingyang gulped and asked, Brother Qin, you mean to say that the gates of potential require different elixirs to unlock? That's right. The potential elixir can only unlock the first 3 levels, while the potential elixir can only unlock the 4th and 5th levels. Qin Feiyang said. The first prince asked anxiously, what about the 6th and 7th levels? I don't know about that. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He would definitely not reveal the small creation elixir. I see. The 2 of them were slightly disappointed, but this was already very shocking. The first prince put down the elixirs and stood up. Then he bowed solemnly and said, Brother Qin, I'll definitely remember your kindness today. Qin Feiyang smiled. Didn't Your Highness say earlier that we're on the same side? Why are you being so polite? Yes. We're on the same side, so there's no need to be polite. The first prince nodded and smiled. The more he looked at Qin Feiyang, the more satisfied he was. His mood had never been better. In the end, he drank until he was dead drunk, and Zhuge Mingyang had to help him back. After the first prince left, Qin Feiyang took out the golden token, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Lu Hong asked, "What's this?" "The crown prince's token." As he spoke, Qin Feiyang flipped the golden token over. On the back of the token, there were 3 bold and vigorous words engraved on it. Chapter 704. The Crown Prince Token? Lu Hong frowned. What's the use of the Crown Prince token? It's very useful. With the Crown Prince token, you can freely enter the Imperial Palace. As he spoke, Qin Feiyang was unable to conceal the excitement in his heart. Lu Hong's eyes lit up. You didn't agree to the first prince's request because of the Crown Prince token? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then what's the difference between the Crown Prince token and the Prince token? Lu Hong asked again. There's a big difference. The Prince token has much less authority and can only enter a part of the Imperial Palace. But with the Crown Prince token, you can enter everything except the forbidden areas of the Imperial Palace. Qin Feiyang said. Lu Hong asked, including the harem? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. With the Crown Prince token he could go see his mother. How could he not be excited? Lu Hong said. Then why didn't you mention it before? I didn't think of it at first. I only remembered it when I saw the first prince. And both the Crown Prince token and the Prince token are very rare. Qin Feiyang said. What do you mean? Lu Hong didn't understand. I'll have to start from the first emperor. When the Great Qin Empire was first established, the first emperor set up the Crown Prince token, and the Prince token in consideration of the abilities of the princes. The purpose of the Crown Prince token and the Prince token is to recruit capable people to assist the princes and the Crown Prince. It's equivalent to a trusted aide. But at the same time, the first emperor was worried that the princes would recruit too many trusted aides and create chaos in the Imperial Palace, so he limited the number. There are 2 Crown Prince tokens in total. The Prince token is even rarer. Every prince only has 1. And it's a lifetime restriction. 1 token is 1 less token. That's why the first prince wasn't willing to take out the Crown Prince token. Of course, I also guessed that other princes would come to me, so I kept delaying it. As expected. The 13th prince is here, and he even took out the prince's medallion as bait to force the first prince to use his trump card. Qin Feiyang briefly explained. After hearing this, Lu Hong sighed with emotion and said, You really didn't miss anything. No. There's one thing I didn't expect. Qin Feiyang shook his head. What is it? Lu Hong was suspicious. Eliminate the other princes. I thought that when I suggested this, the first prince would agree without hesitation. I didn't expect him to reject me. Qin Feiyang said. You still plan to get rid of them? Lu Hong frowned. If the first prince agrees, I would like to do that. But now, I have to think about it carefully. However, if they don't know what's good for them and try to scheme against me, I won't show any mercy. Qin Feiyang sneered. Lu Hong was silent for a moment before she smiled and said, No matter what you do, Fatso and I will support you. Thank you. Qin Feiyang looked at her gratefully and put the Crown Prince's medallion into his pocket. He smiled and said, Pay the bill and leave immediately. If nothing went wrong, the other princes would also come. He didn't have the time to waste on these people. Lu Hong quickly paid the bill and returned to the pavilion. Qin Feiyang immediately opened the teleportation gate and brought Lu Hong back to the alchemy room in the temple. As he expected, not long after he left, the other princes came to the fragrant moon in one after another. When they heard that he had left, they were all a little angry. Alchemy Room 701, inside the ancient castle. Qin Feiyang opened the 6-word divine formula. Lu Hong was also preparing to cultivate. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something and asked, Do you think the Crown Prince gave the other Crown Prince's medallion to Zhuge Mingyang? Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and said, It should be. Otherwise, with Zhuge Mingyang's ability, it's impossible for him to work for the Crown Prince. This is the difference between people. Take Wan Qiu for example. Not only will he lose face by sucking up to others, he won't have a good ending in the end. Lu Hong looked at him with disdain. That's for sure. In the eyes of the 13th prince, Wuxia is an obedient dog. If he's unhappy one day, he might kill him. In comparison, Tan Wu and Ling Yu are much wiser. They don't participate in any side and cultivate in a low-key manner. Although they will be targeted, at least they can keep their lives. Qin Feiyang said. Lu Hong nodded and said, Zhuge Mingyang is not simple. You have to be careful. I know. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he began to copy the second stroke of the kill formula. Seeing this, Lu Hong asked suspiciously, Aren't you going to the Imperial Palace? Qin Feiyang's arm trembled and said, I want to go, but I can't go now. Why? Lu Hong didn't understand. Qin Feiyang said, I just got the Crown Prince's medallion, and I'm going to the Imperial Palace. If it were you, wouldn't you be suspicious of my intentions? Yes. Lu Hong nodded without hesitation. Then she suddenly understood. Without saying anything more, she closed her eyes and began to cultivate. But Qin Feiyang didn't copy the kill formula again. He withdrew his arm, lowered his head and frowned. Suddenly, he closed the 6 words formula and transmitted a message to Ren Wuxuang. Soon, Ren Wuxuang's shadow appeared. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, Sister, how is it? Did Kai Yu and Xing Wanli come to harass you? Didn't you see that Shen Mei is still in my cultivation room? Now we don't even dare to go out of the cultivation room. It's so annoying. Ren Wuxuang said angrily. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. It seemed that this Kai Yu had to be dealt with as soon as possible. He said, Give me your current coordinates. I'll be there right away. What are you doing here? Ren Wuxuang looked at him suspiciously. I have something to do. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You're so mysterious all day. Ren Wuxuang rolled his eyes at him, but he also gave the coordinates to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang immediately left the castle, opened the portal, and appeared in Ren Wuxuang's cultivation room. You're here. Shen Mei was cultivating at the side. Seeing Qin Feiyang arrive, she opened her eyes and greeted him. Not bad. Your cultivation has improved quite a bit. Qin Feiyang laughed. No matter how good it is, it can't be compared to you. Shen Mei shook his head helplessly. In the past, he could see through Qin Feiyang's cultivation, but now he couldn't see through it. Obviously, this guy had already broken through to the 2-star War Master. Qin Feiyang laughed and asked, Which cultivation room is Feng Wuxia in? Why are you asking him? The 2 girls couldn't help but frown, and the disgust on their faces was undisguised. Qin Feiyang laughed faintly. Actually, this Feng Wuxia is not that annoying. At least he is much better than Wan Qiu. Ren Wuxuang said angrily. In the 9 Nether Yellow Springs he schemed against us time and time again, and you still don't hate him? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Okay, I won't argue with you. Tell me. I have something to ask him. Ren Wuxuang snorted, then turned his head and ignored Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang could only look at Shen Mei helplessly. Shen Mei shook her head and smiled. He is in the 801 cultivation room. Qin Feiyang said. What about Tan Wu? He seems to be next door to Feng Wuxia. Shen Mei thought for a moment and said. Okay, I won't disturb you. As for Kai Yu, don't worry, I will take care of it soon. Qin Feiyang said and turned to look at the stone door. Looking at the tightly shut stone door, he was stunned. Then he looked back at Ren Wuxuang and smiled apologetically. Sister, please open the door. Ren Wuxuang said angrily. Then tell me first, why are you looking for Feng Wuxia? This, Qin Feiyang hesitated and said. Can we talk about it later? You. Forget it, since you are all grown up, you don't have to listen to me. Ren Wuxuang waved her hand, and the stone door slowly opened. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly, turned his head, and strode out of the cultivation room. Shen Mei looked at Qin Feiyang's back and looked at Ren Wuxuang. You are a little strange now. What's strange? Ren Wuxuang was stunned and asked. If it was in the past, you would never be angry in front of others, but now you are angry in front of Qin Feiyang. No, to be precise, it should be coquettish. Tell me honestly, are you having feelings for him? Shen Mei giggled. Coquettish? Ren Wuxuang's face stiffened and she said angrily. When did I? Don't talk nonsense. Are you sure I am talking nonsense? Shen Mei looked at her teasingly. Ren Wuxuang obviously began to panic, and a blush crept up her cheeks, finally willing to open the door. At this moment, a cold laugh sounded, and Xing Wanli rushed into the cultivation room like lightning. Their faces darkened at once. Ren Wuxuang shouted, "What are you doing here again? Get out immediately." "Get out. It's not up to you now. Wait for me to inform senior brother Kaiyu, then I will definitely teach you a lesson." As Xing Wanli spoke, he took out an image crystal and sent a message to Kaiyu. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also came to the door of cultivation room 801 and gently knocked on the stone door. Not long after, the stone door slowly opened. Feng Wuxia was behind the door, and when he saw Qin Feiyang, he looked a little startled and said, "What are you doing here?" Qin Feiyang laughed. "After all, we are old friends. Aren't you going to invite me in?" Feng Wuxia frowned and retreated to the side. After Qin Feiyang entered, Feng Wuxia closed the stone door and said, "You don't come without a reason. If you have something to say it quickly." Qin Feiyang looked around the cultivation room, which was about the same size as the alchemy room he was in, and there was nothing extra, only a shabby futon. He turned to look at Feng Wuxia and said, "Do you remember when we were in the 9 Nether Yellow Springs when we left the swamp? You hid in the mountain ridge and ambushed us? What? Now you want to settle the score with me?" Feng Wuxia frowned. "You misunderstood. I just want to know, who are the siblings?" Qin Feiyang said. Back then, Feng Wuxia personally said that their whereabouts were told to them by a pair of siblings. At that time, Qin Feiyang still felt a little incredulous, but because too many things happened later, he forgot about it. And on the day he entered the temple, he vaguely realized that he seemed to have missed something, but he couldn't remember it for a while. It wasn't until just now that he remembered. So he immediately ran over to ask Feng Wuxia. Of course, if it was just an ordinary person, he wouldn't care so much. But the key point was that this pair of siblings told Feng Wuxia and the others their location, allowing Feng Wuxia and the others to seize the opportunity to ambush them, obviously with bad intentions. So, Chapter 705. So that's what you're asking. Feng Wuxia suddenly understood and relaxed a lot. He smiled evilly. What's wrong? And when did you, Qin Feiyang, ever get scared? Scared? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. I just want to know who they are. Feng Wuxia said. I don't know who they are either. Haven't you seen them before? How can you not know? Qin Feiyang frowned. Feng Wuxia shook his head. I've seen them before, but they didn't tell me their names. Qin Feiyang said. Then you should know what they look like, right? I know that, but why should I tell you? Feng Wuxia smiled evilly. You don't have to tell me. But if you don't tell me, I'll definitely go find Xuening and Xuerua. Who knows what I'll do then? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Are you threatening me? Feng Wuxia's eyes darkened. Qin Feiyang nodded. You're right, I'm threatening you. Feng Wuxia narrowed his eyes, which flashed with a cold light. Suddenly, he smiled. Qin Feiyang is indeed Qin Feiyang. You don't even hide your threats. Okay, I'll tell you. Feng Wuxia waved his hand and his battle chi surged. 2 shadows of a man and a woman quickly condensed in the void. Qin Feiyang raised his head to look, and his expression immediately stiffened. The man was in his 20s. He had a tall figure, and was wearing clothes made of tiger skin. On his face, there was a bright smile. He looked very bright, and gave people an inexplicable sense of familiarity. The woman was wearing a mink skin. Her skin was whiter than snow, and her hair was black and beautiful. Her bright eyes were as clear as a mirror. Her whole body was filled with an ethereal aura. Both of them had extraordinary temperaments. How is this possible? Shouldn't they be in the Forgotten Land? Looking at the man and woman, Qin Feiyang muttered to himself, his eyes filled with disbelief. Seeing Qin Feiyang's expression, Feng Wuxia frowned and asked, You know them? I do. But I don't know if it's them. Is there anyone who looks so similar in this world? Qin Feiyang furrowed his brows tightly and asked, Did you meet them again when you left the 9 underworlds? No. Maybe they only landed on the other side after we left. It's also possible that they've already died in the 9 underworlds. After all, the 9 underworld's yellow springs is extraordinarily dangerous. Feng Wuxia said. Dead. Qin Feiyang frowned and lowered his head to ponder. I told you to get out, didn't you hear me? Suddenly, a cold shout came faintly from outside. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. Wasn't that Ren Wuxuang's voice? Who was she scolding? Could it be? His expression suddenly changed as he looked at Feng Wuxia and cupped his hands. Thank you for telling me goodbye. Feng Wuxia waved his hand, and the stone door opened. Qin Feiyang immediately turned around and walked outside. Feng Wuxia suddenly said, Qin Feiyang, you can deal with me, but you can't hurt Xue Ning and Xuerhua, otherwise I will not rest until you die. As long as you don't provoke me again, I don't have time to care about you. Qin Feiyang's footsteps paused. He didn't even turn his head as he spoke and left. Soon, he arrived near Ren Wuxuang's cultivation room. At this moment, both sides of the corridor were packed with people, but no one said a word. They just silently looked at Ren Wuxuang's cultivation room. Get out of the way. Qin Feiyang's face darkened as he shouted. Qin Feiyang. Why is he here? The crowd was stunned as they looked towards the direction of the voice. Their expressions changed drastically as they hurriedly retreated to the side with a hint of respect on their faces. Qin Feiyang strode to the door of Ren Wuxuang's cultivation room and turned to look inside. Inside the cultivation room, other than Ren Wuxuang and Xin Mei, there were 2 more black-clothed youths. One of them was Xing Wanli. As for the other person, Qin Feiyang had some impression of him, but he was not too familiar with him. However, it was obvious that it was Caillou. What do you want? Qin Feiyang shouted coldly, his eyes gloomy. Feiyang. Upon hearing Qin Feiyang's voice, the 2 girls seemed to have seen their savior, and hurriedly ran behind Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang? Caillou and Xing Wanli could not help but be stunned. Xing Wanli transmitted his voice. Senior brother Caillou. When I was waiting over there just now, I saw Qin Feiyang walk out of this cultivation room. Caillou frowned and said in a low voice, so this Qin Feiyang and Ren Wuxuang's relationship is not bad. I think so, Xing Wanli secretly said. Understood. Caillou's eyes flashed as he looked up at Qin Feiyang and said, I've long heard of Brother Qin's name. Now that I've met you, you really live up to your reputation. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, let's skip the pleasantries. Tell me, what do I have to do for you to let them go? Caillou said, look at what you're saying. As long as Brother Qin says the word, I'll never harass them again. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang frowned. Caillou glanced at the people on both sides and said with a faint smile, there are some words that can't be said in public. Come in and let's talk slowly. Ren Wuxuang said angrily, you really think you're the owner of this place? This is my cultivation room. If you have anything to say, go somewhere else. It's fine. Wait for me outside. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and walked into the cultivation room. Then he half closed the stone door and looked at Caillou saying, speak. Caillou said, I believe you also know who I'm working for. I know, but I don't know which prince are you working for. Qin Feiyang said. Caillou said, His Highness the Second Prince. So it's him. Qin Feiyang came to a sudden realization. He had quite a deep impression of this second prince. Because, apart from the first prince, the second prince was the one who schemed against him the most. Qin Feiyang said, What you want to say is that you want me to follow the second prince. That's right. As long as you follow the second prince, we'll be on the same side. At that time, not only will I not harass them, but I'll also treat them like my own sisters. Caillou said with a smile. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, In this way, both sides will be happy. It's a good idea, but what if I don't agree? If you don't agree, although I'm a little afraid of you now, with my power and ability, it's more than enough to deal with 2 women. You can't protect them all the time. Caillou said with a smile, as if he was sure that Qin Feiyang would be defeated. Qin Feiyang, let me give you a piece of advice. Be sensible. It won't benefit anyone if you fall out with them. Xing Wanli sneered. Qin Feiyang glanced at Xing Wanli, then looked at Caillou and said, To be honest, I'm really not afraid of falling out with you now. Their eyes darkened. Not to mention you cats and dogs. Even if the second prince came in person, he wouldn't dare to do anything to me. With that, Qin Feiyang prepared to take out the crown prince token. Hee, so lively. But at this moment, a faint laughter sounded from outside. This voice. Caillou's face suddenly changed. Qin Feiyang laughed. Because the owner of this voice was Zhuge Mingyang. Greetings, senior brother Zhuge. At the same time, respectful voices could be heard from outside as well. After a few breaths, Zhuge Mingyang pushed open the stone door, walked into the cultivation room, and said in surprise, Caillou, why are you here? What are you doing here? Caillou's pupils shrank, and he cupped his hands and bowed. Greetings, senior brother Zhuge. We're all disciples of Marquis. I can't accept your bow, and I'm also afraid that your father will find trouble with me. Zhuge Mingyang smiled faintly. Caillou frowned and asked, Senior brother Zhuge, are you just here to join in the fun? I'm not here to join in the fun. I just received news that someone is bullying my younger brother, so I wanted to see who is so daring, and it's you. Zhuge Mingyang laughed. Younger brother? Caillou and Xing Wanli looked at each other. The crowd outside was also bewildered. Who was Zhuge Mingyang's younger brother? Qin Feiyang? Xing Wanli asked carefully. May I ask, senior brother Zhuge, who is your younger brother? Zhuge Mingyang walked to Qin Feiyang and laughed. It's him, Qin Feiyang. What? It's really him. When did he have a relationship with Zhuge Mingyang? Everyone's heart was in turmoil, and they were shocked to the extreme. Ren Wuxia and Shen Mei had suspicious looks on their faces. Shen Mei walked to the side of a martial arts hall disciple and whispered, Who is Zhuge Mingyang? Why are you all so afraid of him? You don't know? Oh right, you just came here not long ago, so it's normal that you don't know. Let me tell you, he is the #1 martial marquis in the imperial capital, the only son of Marquis Zhuge, and he was once the #1 demon in the imperial capital. It's no exaggeration to say that even the hall masters of the Divine Hall and the princes of the Arch Palace have to be courteous when they see him. Tell me, how can we not be afraid? Qin Feiyang is really lucky to be able to curry favor with him. That martial arts hall disciple whispered. His heart was sour, and his face was filled with envy. Damn. Shen Mei was dumbfounded. Ren Wuxia was also speechless for a long time. They didn't expect that in just a month, Qin Feiyang would become brothers with such a demon. They couldn't help but be impressed by this ability. Caillou's expression was also very interesting. Originally, he was very confident that he could force Qin Feiyang to compromise, but he didn't expect Zhuge Mingyang to suddenly appear. This made it difficult for him to get off the tiger. However, Zhuge Mingyang's face always maintained a smile, and said, Caillou, I really don't understand. How did my brother offend you? Why do you have to make such a big fuss? This? Caillou didn't know how to answer for a moment. Forget it, I won't ask. I'm not interested to know. I just want to say that from now on, if anyone dares to find trouble with Qin Feiyang, then they are going against me, Zhuge Mingyang. Of course, this includes his friends. Zhuge Mingyang laughed. He said it casually, but it was like a clap of thunder in the ears of Caillou and those outside. Zhuge Mingyang looked at Caillou and asked, Did you hear me clearly? Do you need me to say it again? No, I heard you clearly. I'll leave right away. Chapter 706. As soon as Caillou left, the crowd of onlookers also dispersed in an uproar. Soon, only Qin Feiyang and the other three were left. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. Thank you, brother Zhuge, for coming to our rescue. Zhuge Mingyang smiled and glanced at Ren Wuxia and Shen Mei. Is it convenient for you to talk? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Zhuge Mingyang asked, If I didn't come, would you have taken out the crown prince token? What else could I do? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Zhuge Mingyang said, That's what I want to say. Don't tell anyone that you have the crown prince token. Why? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Because of your safety. Although the crown prince token can protect you, it will also bring you a fatal disaster. After all, you are a great threat. If they know that you have joined the first prince's side, they will definitely do everything possible to get rid of you. Zhuge Mingyang said. That makes sense. Qin Feiyang nodded. Of course, you don't have to worry. I have already said that. In the future, even if the first princes want to deal with you, they will have to think twice. Zhuge Mingyang said confidently. Qin Feiyang smiled. Then I'll have to trouble you, brother Zhuge. Please take care of me in the future. We are all friends. Don't be so polite. If you need anything in the future, just send me a message. With that, Zhuge Mingyang took out an image crystal. Qin Feiyang also took out an image crystal. After establishing the contract, Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal and said, Brother Zhuge, in your opinion, how should I reply to the 13th prince in 3 days? This, Zhuge Mingyang pondered for a moment and said, To be honest, I have the same idea as you. What idea? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked. Eradicate them. A cold light flashed in Zhuge Mingyang's eyes. Qin Feiyang felt a chill in his heart. This Zhuge Mingyang was indeed bold. Zhuge Mingyang continued. If it were up to me, I'd like you to get close to the 13th prince and find an excellent opportunity. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, I don't care. The key is whether your highness agrees or not. Your highness has too many concerns. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to make a decision in a short time. Zhuge Mingyang sighed deeply and said, But we can act first and report later. I believe that His Highness won't blame us. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and said with a smile, Since Brother Zhuge said so, I might as well give it a try. Zhuge Mingyang reminded him, Just try your best. Don't force yourself. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then I'll take my leave first. Zhuge Mingyang said with a smile, and turned to leave. Qin Feiyang also turned and walked out of the cultivation room. Looking at Zhuge Mingyang's back, his eyes flickered. Ren Wushuang walked up and said in a low voice, Feiyang, what are you guys talking about? You don't have to worry about this. Just focus on your cultivation. Qin Feiyang hurriedly left these words and opened the teleportation gate. He returned to Alchemy Room 701 and immediately entered the castle. Inside the ancient castle, Qin Feiyang looked at Fatso and the others and said, You guys heard Zhuge Mingyang's words, right? Tell me what you think. Lu Hong pondered for a moment and said, I feel that this might not be Zhuge Mingyang's idea, but the first prince's. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and asked, What do you mean? Back at the Fragrant Moon Inn, from what I saw, the first prince actually had the idea of eliminating the other princes. But just as Zhuge Mingyang said, he had too many misgivings and did not dare to say it out loud. Therefore, Zhuge Mingyang's words were very likely the first prince's idea. Firstly, he wanted to use this to test your loyalty. After all, you just met him, so it's impossible for him to trust you 100%. Secondly, if the plan succeeds, you will reap all the benefits. But if it fails or the plan is exposed, you will be the scapegoat. You won't lose anything. After all, he never personally asked you to deal with the 13th prince. Lu Hong analyzed. Not bad. Just as I thought. But I think that this was not the first prince's idea, but Zhuge Mingyang's. Because the first prince's mind is simply unable to think of a plan that would satisfy both sides. But the first prince definitely knows. Qin Feiyang smiled. They're already scheming against you, and you're still smiling? Lu Hong furrowed her brows and said angrily. Fatso said, Actually, this is a good thing for boss. A good thing? Lu Hong was puzzled. Think about it. What is boss's goal in coming to the imperial capital? He's here for revenge. Now that the first prince wants to kill, boss can borrow the first prince's hand to eliminate those people who are in the way. As for being the scapegoat, do you think boss will give them the chance? Fatso chuckled. So that's how it is. Lu Hong nodded in understanding. She then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Although Fatso's words make sense, murdering a prince is no small matter. You must be careful. I know. Qin Feiyang nodded. Fatso asked, Oh right boss, who exactly are those siblings? Qin Feiyang said, Mu Qing Mu Shuer. Impossible. Aren't they in the Forgotten Land? Hearing these two names, the expressions of Fatso and the others changed. I don't understand either. I don't understand even more. Why would they scheme against me? Qin Feiyang frowned. Back then in the Forgotten Land, We haven't even settled the score with them for informing the Pill Tower's pagoda master. Now they actually dare to provoke us again. Wolf King said coldly, his eyes flashing with killing intent. At that time, if it hadn't consumed the 9-chew yellow dragon pill at the critical moment and broken through to the War Emperor, they would have already been buried in the Forgotten Land. Qin Feiyang said, "Looks like when we have the chance, we'll have to make another trip to the Forgotten Land." "Yes. I didn't get the Heavenly Thunder Flame last time. I must get it next time." Fatso nodded. There were too many secrets hidden in the Forgotten Land. For example, that mysterious madam. What was her true identity? And that snow python, was she hiding at the bottom of the lake to protect the altar? Or was there another reason? What was the background of the Mu Qing siblings? How did they leave the Forgotten Land and enter the 9 Netherworld Yellow Springs? Where was he now? There were too many questions that filled their hearts. In the next 3 days, Qin Feiyang and the others were cultivating in the castle. As for the disciples of the various martial marquises, they would knock on the door every day, but in the end, they would return empty-handed. At the same time, in the next 3 days, the Treasure Pavilion auctioned off another 3 potential pills. The transaction price was not out of Qin Feiyang's expectations. It was 10 to 20 billion higher than the transaction price on the first day. And the 4 potential pills that Qin Feiyang had left behind had a total value of more than 800 billion. After deducting the cost of purchasing medicinal ingredients, Qin Feiyang could still earn around 300 billion. And on the morning of this day, Lin Dian came. Qin Feiyang closed the 6-word divine formula, lowered his head and pondered for a while, then turned to look at Lu Hong and said, "Go to the treasure pavilion and get the remaining gold coins, and ask Sun Dahai if he can find a grade 5 pill fire." "Okay." Lu Hong nodded. After leaving the castle, she immediately opened a portal and left. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, and with a thought, the stone door slowly opened. Seeing Lin Dian walk in, Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "You're here so early, aren't you a bit too impatient?" If it wasn't for the 13th prince, do you think I would want to come to this damned place? Tell me, what's your answer?" Lin Dian snorted and said expressionlessly. Qin Feiyang said faintly, "Your attitude makes me very unhappy, so I don't want to talk to you. Send a message to the 13th prince. I want to talk to him face to face." Lin Dian glared at him. "What? Do you have a problem with that? Do you believe that I won't throw you out?" Qin Feiyang sneered. "You win." Lin Dian gritted his teeth and glared at him, then took out the image crystal and quickly activated it. Soon, the 13th prince's figure appeared and he smiled. "Brother Qin, what do you think?" Qin Feiyang said, "I can help you, and I don't even need your prince's token, but I need a grade 5 alchemy fire." "A grade 5 alchemy fire?" The 13th prince frowned and shook his head. "A grade 5 alchemy fire is not rare in the temple, but it's extremely rare outside. It won't be easy to find one." "That's your problem. If you don't have a grade 5 alchemy fire, you can go to the general pavilion and compete with them for the potential pill. But I don't think you can compete with the other princes with your wealth." Qin Feiyang smiled. The 13th prince's face darkened. "Can't you change your condition?" "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head without hesitation. The 13th prince was silent for a while, then he looked at Lin Dian and said, "I remember that you have a grade 5 alchemy fire at home?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and turned to look at Lin Dian. What a coincidence. Fatso had heard that there were 5 martial marquises who each had a grade 5 alchemy fire. It seemed that Lin Dian's family was one of them. If that was the case, then he couldn't let it go. Lin Dian frowned and said, "Your Highness, I do have a grade 5 alchemy fire at home, but it's in the treasury, and my grandfather is personally guarding the treasury. I'm afraid it's impossible for him to give it to me." The 13th prince raised his eyebrows and said, "I don't care who's guarding it, you have to get it." "Your Highness, aren't you making things difficult for me? You know my grandfather's temper. If you take the alchemy fire without his permission, you'll be beaten to death." Lin Dian said, looking a little angry. The 13th prince thought for a while and said, "How about this? If he really blames you after this, I'll plead for you." After that he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Lin Dian took such a big risk, shouldn't you do something? Of course. As long as I get the alchemy fire, I'll immediately give him 10 potential pills. Qin Feiyang smiled. 10 pills. Lin Dian's body trembled, his eyes glowing green. One had to know. The price of the potential pills auctioned by the General Pavilion reached more than 200 billion. What was the concept of 10 potential pills? Of course. His family didn't lack this money. But the point was, he didn't dare to participate in the competition between the princes. So, no matter how many potential pills were auctioned by the General Pavilion, he wouldn't get a share. Chapter 707. Seeing that Lin Dian still had some concerns, Qin Feiyang smiled and said, If you miss this time, there won't be a next time. Lin Dian gritted his teeth and said, Okay, I'll think of a way to get the alchemy fire, but how do I know if you're lying to me? Qin Feiyang took out a potential pill and threw it to Lin Dian. He smiled and said, Is this enough sincerity? Lin Dian caught the potential pill. After confirming that there was no mistake, he said happily, It's enough, it's enough. Haha. The Crown Prince laughed and said, Brother Qin is indeed a straightforward person. Then let's meet outside the city tomorrow. Outside the city? Qin Feiyang stared blankly and asked in confusion, Why do we have to go outside the city? Opening the door of potential is not a small matter. Naturally, I have to find a secret place. That place is called the Black Dragon Pool. Only Lin Dian and I know about it. Lin Dian will tell you the coordinates. I'll see you tomorrow morning. After the 13th prince finished speaking, he turned off the image crystal. Lin Dian also put away the potential pill and said, Brother Qin, I was wrong in the past. I hope Brother Qin can forgive me. It's all in the past. Don't mention it again. Qin Feiyang smiled. Lin Dian said with shame, Brother Qin's magnanimity is really admirable. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, Is the Black Dragon Pool far from the capital city? Yes. It's surrounded by barren hills. No one will come to disturb us. Lin Dian said. That's good. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then I'll go do my work. Goodbye. After Lin Dian gave the coordinates of the Black Dragon Pool to Qin Feiyang, he opened the portal and left. Outside the city. Black Dragon Pool. Qin Feiyang also lowered his head and pondered. He felt that there was something fishy about this. Wasn't it just opening the door of potential? Was there a need to go so far? Suddenly, he took out the image crystal and sent a message to Lu Hong. After a while, Lu Hong's image appeared. Qin Feiyang asked, Did you ask Sun Dahai about a 5th grade pill fire? Lu Hong said, He's still busy. I haven't seen him yet. Qin Feiyang said, Then don't ask about it later. Why? Lu Hong was stunned and looked at him in confusion. We'll talk about it when we get back. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned off the image crystal and fell into deep thought again. About half an hour passed. Lu Hong finally returned and asked suspiciously, What's wrong? Qin Feiyang explained in detail that the 13th prince had invited him to meet outside the city. Something's wrong. Lu Hong said immediately. Tell me. Qin Feiyang said. Think about it. The capital city is so big, and the imperial palace isn't small either. There must be a secret place. Even if he doesn't want to be disturbed, there's no need for him to go outside the city, right? I have a feeling that he wants to hide something by asking you out of the city. Lu Hong speculated. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, I think he wants to get rid of me after I've outlived my usefulness. That's completely possible. Lu Hong nodded. After Qin Feiyang helped the 13th prince open the door of potential and enter the Master of War, the 13th prince would then turn hostile and kill Qin Feiyang. This way no one would be able to refine the potential pill in the future. At that time, the other princes would not be able to get the potential pill and would not be able to open the door of potential. In the end, the throne would be in the 13th prince's bag. Because only he had opened the door of potential, the other princes had not. And the gap between them would only grow bigger. Who would be qualified to compete with him? None of these people are easy to deal with. Lu Hong sighed and said, If the 13th prince really wants to deal with you, he will definitely set up an ambush. I think it's best if you don't go tomorrow. I'm going, Qin Feiyang said. Lu Hong frowned and said, You're going to die, do you know that? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly and said, It's hard to say who will win tomorrow. What do you mean? Lu Hong was surprised. Even if he doesn't attack me tomorrow, I will attack them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked you to give up looking for the rank 5 pill fire, Qin Feiyang said. So that's what you think? Lu Hong looked at him in disbelief. If the 13th prince and Lin Dian died outside, it would definitely cause a commotion. At that time, the emperor and Lin Dian's family would definitely send people to investigate the cause of death. And the rank 5 pill fire that Lin Dian took from his family was undoubtedly the only clue. If the emperor and the Lin family found out that they were also looking for the rank 5 pill fire, they would definitely come to interrogate them. At that time, even if they could find an excuse to avoid it, they would definitely be monitored in the future. After thinking this through, Lu Hong shook her head and smiled. You're starting to plan now. You're really good. Not enough. I need to talk to Zhuge Mingyang. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and took Lu Hong to the castle. Early the next morning, a young man in white appeared out of thin air in front of the door of the general pavilion. When a staff member saw the young man, his eyes suddenly lit up and ran up to him with a flattering smile. Mr. Qin, welcome to the general pavilion. Mr. Qin. Is that Qin Feiyang? The other staff members, as well as the customers trading in the treasure pavilion, all looked at the young man in white. It's really Qin Feiyang. Brother Qin, my name is Theta Wang, nice to meet you. Brother Qin, I'm Li Ba. May I have the honor of buying you a drink? In an instant, everyone rushed toward Qin Feiyang. This person was indeed Qin Feiyang. Since the incident at the Fragrant Moon brothel, the people in the capital basically knew what Qin Feiyang looked like. Qin Feiyang glanced at the crowd around him and smiled. Everyone, I still have something to do. We'll meet again in the future. Please step aside. The staff member who first recognized Qin Feiyang said, Yes, don't block Mr. Qin's way. The crowd in front had to disperse in disappointment. Mr. Qin, I heard that you're an alchemist. Are you here to buy any medicinal materials? The staff member asked while ushering Qin Feiyang into the general pavilion. I do want to buy some medicinal materials, and also go to the auction house to see if I can find any treasures. Qin Feiyang smiled. The staff member said, I see, then I'll take you directly to the auction house. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Soon, Qin Feiyang entered a separate VIP room. The VIP room was about 100 feet long. It wasn't very big, and one could clearly see the auction house below. At this time, the auction hadn't started yet, and there weren't many people in the auction house. Qin Feiyang sat on the chair and said with a smile, Go tell Sun Dahai to come and sit with me when he's free. Okay. The staff member responded, then turned and trotted out. Hee, this is a rare opportunity. Fat Lord must squander like crazy today. When the staff member ran out of the VIP room and closed the door, Qin Feiyang, who was sitting on the chair, immediately revealed a trace of a smile. He even called himself Fat Lord. Obviously, this Qin Feiyang wasn't the real Qin Feiyang, but Fatso in disguise. As for Qin Feiyang himself, he had already gone to the Black Dragon Pool. Black Dragon Pool. It was a small pool, but it was very deep. The water of the pool was also eerily black. It was said that a black dragon once lived here, which was why it was called the Black Dragon Pool. At this time, Lin Dian and the 13th prince were already waiting by the Black Dragon Pool. Lin Dian held a metal box in his hand. It was the size of a palm, as black as ink, and exuded an ancient aura. He looked at the metal box and asked reluctantly, Your Highness, are you really going to give him the alchemy fire? Naive. A grade 5 alchemy fire is priceless. Why would I give it to him? The 13th prince sneered. Lin Dian immediately raised his head and looked at the 13th prince in surprise. Just watch. When he helps me open the door of potential and step into the Master of War, it will be the time of his death. The 13th prince's eyes flashed with killing intent. I see. Lin Dian muttered as a trace of coldness crept up his eyes. Whoosh. At this time, A figure appeared out of thin air. It was Qin Feiyang. Sensing Qin Feiyang's aura, the 13th prince and the 13th prince immediately covered up their killing intent and replaced it with a friendly look. But even if they covered it up in time, Qin Feiyang still caught a glimpse of it. He sneered inwardly and landed by the pool. Standing opposite the two, he smiled and asked, "Where's the alchemy fire?" The 13th prince said, "Lin Dian, give it to him." Lin Dian immediately walked in front of Qin Feiyang and handed over the metal box in his hand. Qin Feiyang took the metal box and opened it. A terrifyingly high temperature immediately surged out. The alchemy fire lay quietly in the metal box. It was the size of a baby's fist, dark green in color, and emitted an obscure aura. Looking at the alchemy fire, Qin Feiyang was secretly delighted. Because the alchemy fire was in a state of awakening, it meant that it was ownerless and could be devoured by the netherworld demonic flame immediately. After calming down, Qin Feiyang closed the metal box and looked at Lin Dian. "Didn't you say that your grandfather personally guarded the treasury? How did you get it?" Lin Dian said, "Don't worry about that. Give me the remaining 9 potential pills." Qin Feiyang said, "I want to know the key." "You're so annoying," Lin Dian said angrily. The 13th prince smiled. "Just tell him. I'm also very curious." Lin Dian frowned and said, "My grandfather likes to drink, so I found a jar of good wine and tricked him into taking it away." Qin Feiyang said, "So your grandfather doesn't know that you took the alchemy fire?" Lin Dian nodded. Qin Feiyang smiled and asked again, "What about the potential pill I gave you yesterday?" Lin Dian said, "It's still here." Qin Feiyang asked curiously, "Why didn't you take it? Can you not talk so much nonsense? Hurry up." Lin Dian was a little angry. "Okay, I'll give it to you right away." Qin Feiyang smiled and put away the metal box, then put his hand into his chest. Suddenly, killing intent surged in his eyes. At the same time, he pulled out his big hand from his chest. However, it was not the potential pill in his hand, but the Chang Shui. How could Lin Dian have expected such a change? Qin Feiyang held pale snow in his hand and directly pierced his heart with a saber. Lin Dian could not help but scream in pain. If you had taken that potential pill yesterday, you could have had a taste of opening the door of potential before you died. Unfortunately, you don't have the chance now. Qin Feiyang laughed and pulled out the Chang Shui. An arrow of blood spurted out from Lin Dian's heart. "You!" Lin Dian raised his hand and pointed angrily at Qin Feiyang. However, before he could say anything, Qin Feiyang raised his arm again. The Chang Shui was like a graceful swan, instantly cutting off Lin Dian's throat. Immediately, Lin Dian covered his neck and stared at Qin Feiyang with hatred, then fell backward. Chapter 708. Seeing this, the 13th prince was dumbfounded. Lin Dian had been killed? Suddenly, he looked up at Qin Feiyang and roared, "Do you know what you're doing?" "Of course I know. I also know what you're trying to do." Qin Feiyang faintly smiled. The 13th prince's heart skipped a beat. Qin Feiyang said, "If I'm not wrong, there should be other people hiding nearby, right?" "You." The 13th prince looked at him in disbelief. "Looks like I'm right. Tell them to come out. They're the guards of the princes. Don't you think it's embarrassing to hide?" Qin Feiyang sneered. "Haha. Qin Feiyang, oh Qin Feiyang, I like you more and more. If you follow me, you won't have to worry about anything. Unfortunately, you've chosen a path of no return." The 13th prince laughed out loud, and his face was filled with disdain. Dong. Before he finished speaking, the calm black dragon pool suddenly splashed water everywhere. 2 burly men jumped out of the water and landed behind the 13th prince. Both of them were tall, and their upper bodies were exposed. Their bronze chest muscles were filled with explosive power. "You're indeed the 13th prince's men." Qin Feiyang looked at the two with a gloomy gaze. Whether it was their figure or aura, they were exactly the same as the 2 black-robed men in the fragrant moon brothel. The 2 didn't speak, but their faces were cold. "I really can't bear to kill you. Follow me. When I become the emperor, I promise to make you the imperial advisor of the great Qin Empire." At that time, You'll be second only to one and above all. How impressive will that be? The 13th prince said in high spirits. He felt as if the emperor's throne was already in his bag. Second only to one and above all. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. I can't refuse such tempting conditions. Then agree. Because only by agreeing can you keep your life and have everything. The 13th prince chuckled. Qin Feiyang glanced at the two men and asked with a smile. Are you so confident that you can kill me? These two guards of mine are both from the 9 Stars War sect. What do you think? The 13th prince joked. 9 Stars War sect. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. Sure enough, they were two terrifying experts. However, he had come prepared. Brother Zhuge, come out. Following his words, a short mountain behind him collapsed, causing a cloud of dust to rise into the air. Whoosh! Zhuge Mingyang dashed out of the dust cloud along with a piercing sound, and landed beside Qin Feiyang like a lightning bolt. Zhuge Mingyang. The 13th prince's expression changed. The two guards also turned pale with fright. Why is Zhuge Mingyang here? Could it be that Qin Feiyang had already submitted to the first prince? Your Highness, sorry for the offense. Zhuge Mingyang cupped his hands and smiled. His aura erupted as he took a step towards the 13th prince. He directly attacked, straightforward and nimble. How dare you? The two guards were furious as they stood in front of the 13th prince. Their auras surged and shook the mountains and rivers. Seeing this, Zhuge Mingyang's eyes flashed as he smiled and said, Brother Qin, I'll take care of these two. As for the 13th prince, I'll leave it to you. Following that, he waved his hand and a golden battle chi roared out. It forcefully swept away the two burly men, and disappeared into the horizon like lightning. So strong, Qin Feiyang muttered. Judging from his aura, Zhuge Mingyang was also a 9 Stars War sect, but his battle strength was much stronger than the two burly men. As expected of the number 1 genius of the imperial capital, and Zhuge Mingyang's intention was also quite obvious. With his strength, he was completely capable of killing the 3 of them. There was no need for him to take the two burly men away. He did this because he wanted Qin Feiyang to kill the 13th prince with his own hands. In this way, Qin Feiyang would have no choice but to accompany the first prince to the end. Of course, Qin Feiyang didn't care about any of this. He withdrew his gaze and looked at the 13th prince, only to see that the 13th prince's face was filled with panic. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, You didn't expect Zhuge Mingyang to appear, did you? You. The 13th prince looked at Qin Feiyang in panic. His throat seemed to be blocked by something and he couldn't say what he wanted to say for a long time. Qin Feiyang said, You want to ask why we're working together? The 13th prince nodded. Let me show you something and you'll know. Qin Feiyang took out the crown prince's token. The crown prince's token. Seeing this, the 13th prince's body trembled. He finally understood. As expected, Qin Feiyang had already sided with the first prince. Qin Feiyang put away the crown prince's token and shook his head with a smile. I have to say that you're really stupid. Why don't you think about it? Since I already knew your intentions, why would I come to see you unprepared? Qin Feiyang said as he walked towards the 13th prince. What do you want to do? The 13th prince stepped back in fear. You still don't understand? Of course I'm going to kill you for the first prince. Qin Feiyang said. How dare you? The 13th prince shouted angrily. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I've already killed Lin Dian, the son of a marquis. It's not a big deal to kill another prince. The 13th prince's body trembled and he hurriedly said, Qin Feiyang, let's talk nicely. Doing this will only benefit my brother. It won't do you any good. Why? Qin Feiyang asked. The 13th prince said anxiously, Think about it. You've been in the limelight for the past few days. If I'm killed now, my father will think of you sooner or later and send people to investigate you. Qin Feiyang said. It's fine. I've already arranged everything. Now everyone in the first district knows that I'm at the main pavilion's auction house. What do you mean? The 13th prince was surprised. Before I came, I asked Fatso to disguise himself as me and enter the main pavilion. So, even if the emperor investigates, there will be countless people who can testify for me. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The 13th prince was extremely shocked. He had actually arranged everything in advance. This person's mind was too terrifying. Qin Feiyang said. Any last words? You can't kill me. Because you're offending your superior. When this matter is exposed, you will die without a complete corpse, the 13th prince roared. When that day comes, it's hard to say who will live and who will die. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. Murdering the current prince is an unforgivable crime. You're a madman. The 13th prince was completely terrified. He turned around and ran like crazy. Boom. Qin Feiyang released his aura, and the 13th prince was immediately imprisoned in the air. He walked step by step, and the 13th prince fell into the abyss of despair. Finally, Qin Feiyang stopped in front of the 13th prince. At this moment, the 13th prince was so scared that he lost control of his bladder. The stench assailed his nostrils, and his face was pale. Qin Feiyang said, If you don't have any last words, I'll tell you a secret. What secret? The 13th prince asked in a trembling voice. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and whispered a few words into the 13th prince's ear. What? The 13th prince was shocked. He muttered in his heart. How is this possible? Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Brother 13, you didn't expect that I would come back one day, did you? No way, you're lying. This is impossible. The 13th prince stared at Qin Feiyang and shook his head like a madman. Nothing is impossible in this world. I came back for revenge. I want our father to regret it for the rest of his life. So, you won't be lonely in the Yellow Springs. Because soon, others will accompany you. Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he grabbed the 13th prince's throat. 10th. 4th brother, for the sake of our brotherhood, I beg you not to kill me. I can help you take revenge. The 13th prince shouted in panic. But his throat was stuck, and his voice was weak and hoarse. Do you still have brotherly love in your eyes? When you learned that my cultivation was destroyed and I was kicked out of the imperial palace, you were all celebrating, right? Qin Feiyang smiled sinisterly. He exerted force with his 5 fingers and broke the 13th prince's neck. Arg! The 13th prince screamed and died on the spot. Next, Qin Feiyang loosened his grip, and the 13th prince fell to the ground. Looking at the 13th prince's body, there was a trace of pain in his eyes. It wasn't because of the 13th prince's death. It was because he remembered what happened more than 10 years ago and the pain and despair he suffered in the 5 years in the Iron Ox town. Boom. Crack. In the distance, the sound of battle was endless. But Qin Feiyang didn't seem to hear it. After a while, the sound of battle finally stopped. Zhuge Mingyang carried the 2 corpses as he flew through the air and landed beside Qin Feiyang. He sized up the 13th prince and Lin Dian's corpses and remained silent for a moment. After a while, he threw the 2 bodies next to the 13th prince and patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder. Don't worry. No one will know. Do I look like I'm worried? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Seeing the smile on Qin Feiyang's face, Zhuge Mingyang couldn't help but laugh. Then he opened a portal and said, I'm going to report this to the first prince. Don't stay here for too long. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, What do you want to do with their bodies? I'll throw them out of the city and let the people from the imperial palace and the Lin family collect their bodies. After all, one of them is a prince and the other is the son of a marquis. We can't just leave their bodies in the wilderness. Zhuge Mingyang smiled. Then with the 4 corpses, he stepped into the teleportation gate and disappeared. Qin Feiyang turned around and looked at the portal that disappeared. His eyes gradually became fierce. No one in this world liked to be played in the palm of another's hand. The first prince and Zhuge Mingyang had schemed against him so many times that he wanted to kill them. Tap, tap. At this moment, the sound of steady and powerful footsteps could be heard coming from the nearby forest. It was Lu Xingqian. Qin Feiyang seemed to have known about Lu Xingqian's appearance, and wasn't surprised at all. Lu Xingqian walked to Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, It's imperative to get rid of the first prince, but he must be the last one. I understand. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, Is there anyone else hiding nearby? No, only Zhuge Mingyang came, Yi Futian said. Lu Xingqian said, In fact, Lu Xingqian had been hiding nearby for a long time, and had been instructed by Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was worried that the first prince would do the same thing as the 13th prince and get rid of him after he had outlived his usefulness. Lu Xingqian might not be as strong as Zhuge Mingyang, but he had a spatial divine item that could move and save him at a critical moment. Chapter 709. Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian also left the Black Dragon Pool and returned to their respective alchemy rooms. The next morning, Lin Dian's grandfather found out that the alchemy fire in the treasury had been stolen. Combined with Lin Dian's strange behavior on the first day, he naturally thought that Lin Dian had taken it. But sending a message to Lin Dian was like throwing a stone into the sea. Lin Dian's grandfather was furious and personally entered the temple, but he found that Lin Dian was not there. Immediately, Lin Dian's grandfather contacted the 13th prince, because Lin Dian and the 13th prince had the best relationship. With this contact, he was shocked to find that the 13th prince had also disappeared. Soon, this matter alarmed the people in the imperial palace. They asked around, but no one knew where the two had gone. Immediately, they realized that something was wrong. After some investigation, they were shocked to find that the 13th prince's bodyguard had also disappeared. Thus, the people of the Lin family and the imperial palace deduced that the two had met with misfortune, and immediately sent people to investigate. At noon that day, suddenly, someone sent news that the 13th prince and Lin Dian's bodies had been found in a barren mountain outside the city. The son of a prince and a marquis had been killed. How could this be? The news spread like a plague in the capital city. In less than an hour, everyone in the capital city knew that the two of them had been killed. Without a doubt, a huge storm was stirred up. Inner city, in a magnificent mansion. Investigate. We must find the real culprit who murdered Lin Dian. In a certain hall, an angry roar was heard. The owner of the voice was Lin Dian's father, Marquis Lin. The imperial palace. A golden shadow appeared in the air above the throne room. As soon as this person appeared, a mighty emperor's aura enveloped the entire imperial palace. In an instant, everyone in the imperial palace knelt down and kowtowed. Murdering a prince, you deserve to die. Commander, I order you to investigate this matter thoroughly and find the real culprit. The golden shadow said faintly, filled with a great majesty. Whoosh! Before the voice died away, a middle-aged man in golden armor soared into the sky, knelt in front of the golden shadow, and said respectfully, I accept the order. The golden figure then dissipated. Men. The man in golden armor also stood up and shouted. Whoosh! Another group of guards in black iron armor flew into the sky, and knelt on one knee in front of this person. Investigate everyone who has a grudge against the 13th prince. I would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than to let one go. The golden armored man shouted. His words carried a shocking murderous aura. Sir. The guards responded respectfully and dispersed, disappearing without a trace. Since the Emperor Ascension, this is the first time a prince has been murdered. Who could it be? Who has the guts to do that? The golden armored man frowned and also disappeared without a trace. Before the 13th prince palace. To the imperial palace to the palace. As for the various martial marquis government, they also gave their own disciples a death order. Because they could see, the Tian Palace was the capital palace. Evening. 2 guards in black iron armor appeared in the sky above the Pill Palace. They did not hide their powerful aura at all. The white-haired old man who was guarding the Pill Palace hurriedly ran to the center of the square and bowed. Greetings, lords. The disciples of the Pill Palace bowed, and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Whoosh! The 2 of them landed on the square and said expressionlessly, Bring us to see Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang? The white-haired old man was slightly stunned. He cupped his hands and said, May I ask, why are you looking for Qin Feiyang? One of them frowned and said, Are you qualified to ask about the invincible Black Army's matters? No. Lords, please follow me. The white-haired old man shrunk his neck and quickly brought the 2 of them into the Pill Palace. Strange, why is the invincible Black Army looking for Qin Feiyang? Did he do something wrong? It shouldn't be. Qin Feiyang has been cultivating in the alchemy room. How could he do something wrong? I heard that the Invincible Black Army is investigating the death of the 13th Prince and Lin Dian. They are here to look for Qin Feiyang. Could it be related to Qin Feiyang? Impossible. Qin Feiyang is just a bumpkin from the spiritual state. He doesn't have the guts to do something like this. The disciples who gathered on the square were discussing in low voices. In the alchemy room, Qin Feiyang was copying the kill formula in the castle. Dong. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Qin Feiyang, the Invincible Black Army is here to question you. Come out. The white-haired old man's voice also echoed in the castle. Invincible Black Army. Qin Feiyang's arm trembled. Fatso opened his eyes and asked, Boss, what is the Invincible Black Army? The Invincible Black Army is responsible for maintaining order in the Imperial Palace. Every one of them is extremely powerful. They are also known as the Imperial Guards. And the commander of the Invincible Black Army is one of the Emperor's confidants. Since the Invincible Black Army is here, it means that the 13th Prince's death has alerted the Emperor. Qin Feiyang said. Fatso reminded him. Then you have to be careful. Don't worry. They haven't found any evidence yet. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here to question you but to arrest you. Qin Feiyang sneered and left the castle. With a thought, the stone door of the alchemy room slowly opened. The white-haired old man led the two people into the alchemy room and pointed at Qin Feiyang. He is Qin Feiyang. He then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Following this, you must honestly answer every question that the two lords ask. I understand. Qin Feiyang nodded and looked at the two black-armored guards. He cupped his hands and said, Please enlighten me. One of them said, Do you know that the 13th Prince and Marquis Lin's son, Lin Dian, were murdered? Qin Feiyang was slightly surprised and said, How is that possible? Who dares to murder them? You don't know? The two frowned. I have been cultivating in seclusion. That's why I only know now. Sirs, when did they die? Where did you find them? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Outside the city. Judging from the wounds on their bodies, they should have been killed yesterday morning. One of them said. Outside the city? Then how can you be sure that they were murdered? What if they died under the claws of a beast? Qin Feiyang frowned. If they were killed by a beast, they would have asked us for help. And they didn't send any signal for help before they died. Moreover, His Highness the 13th Prince had two guards with him. Both of them were from the 9-star battle sect. And there were no such strong beasts in the place where they were killed. It's enough to see that they were murdered. Also, we didn't find any traces of battle at the scene, so we concluded that the murderer was an acquaintance of theirs. Kill them when they were unprepared. The two black-armored guards said. Qin Feiyang suddenly said, So it's like that. Then who is it? How dare they? That's why we came to find you. According to our investigation, they had the most contact with you before they died. And there is a big grudge between you two. So we have reason to suspect that you might be the real murderer. The two black-armored guards said in a deep voice, their eyes flashing with a cold light. Me? Qin Feiyang pointed at his nose and said in fear. My two lords, this is a crime of beheading. You can't talk nonsense. One of them said. Well, let me ask you, where were you yesterday? I was in the Treasure Pavilion's General Pavilion all day yesterday. Qin Feiyang said. Are you sure? Do you know what the consequences of lying to us will be? The two guards' eyes were filled with hostility. I'm sure. If you don't believe me, you can go to the General Pavilion to investigate. Qin Feiyang said. Okay, come with us to the General Pavilion. One of them waved his hand and opened a teleportation door. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and stepped into the teleportation door. So straightforward. Is it really not him? The two guards looked at each other and followed him in. General Pavilion. In the study room. As it was already evening and the auction was over, Sun Dahai was sitting at his desk, burying his head in the accounts. Suddenly, he sensed 3 auras in the study room. He immediately looked up and saw Qin Feiyang standing in front of him. His old face was full of smiles and he got up to greet him. But when he saw the two guards behind Qin Feiyang, his face suddenly changed and he hurriedly said, "Greetings, my two lords." One of them said, "We came to the general pavilion to investigate the death of the 13th prince and Lin Dian." Sun Dahai's heart skipped a beat. He walked in front of the three and looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. He then looked at the two guards and said with a smile, "Ask away." According to Qin Feiyang, he was in the general pavilion yesterday. Is that true? Don't lie to us, because we are under the emperor's order to thoroughly investigate this matter. The two said, "We wouldn't dare." Sun Dahai hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Qin Feiyang was indeed in the general pavilion yesterday, and didn't leave until evening." The two guards frowned. One of them asked, "Why did you come to the general pavilion yesterday?" Qin Feiyang said, "Of course I'm here to buy medicinal herbs." The man frowned and said, "Then why do you need an entire day?" "My two lords, forgive this junior for saying something offensive, but this question is strange. I think it's my freedom to stay here for as long as I want, right? If you suspect that this junior killed them, you have to pay attention to the evidence. Moreover, you also said that the guards beside the 13th prince are 9-star war masters, and this junior is only a 2-star war master. Do I have the ability to do so?" Qin Feiyang said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. The two of them stared at Qin Feiyang for a long time without saying a word. Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not show any signs of lying, they looked away. One of them cupped his hands and said, "Sorry to disturb you." "It's fine. If you have any questions in the future, feel free to find this junior. This junior will definitely cooperate with you." Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. "All right. Then I'll take my leave." Chapter 710. Seeing the portal disappear in front of him, Qin Feiyang also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Although his expression didn't change during the whole process, he was actually quite nervous. Because the people of the Invincible Black Army were good at observing people's body language, the slightest mistake would be discovered by the other party. Therefore, he had to be absolutely sure. Sun Dahai also wiped his cold sweat and asked suspiciously, "Brother Qin, what's going on? Why did they suspect you?" Although he was the steward of the general pavilion and had a high position, he was still quite afraid of the Invincible Black Army, because the Invincible Black Army was directly under the jurisdiction of the emperor. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. "It's because I've been too ostentatious recently." "Ostentatious?" Sun Dahai was stunned and then shook his head and laughed. Indeed, because of the potential pill, Qin Feiyang was like a comet, rapidly rising in the imperial capital. And it was a famous saying that there were many troubles when one was popular. Therefore, some troubles were inevitable. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in Sun Dahai's eyes. He chuckled and said, "Although this is just a misunderstanding, I'm the one who helped you out. Shouldn't I express my gratitude?" Qin Feiyang's face twitched. This old man really knew how to take advantage of the situation. "Goodbye." He directly opened a portal and walked in without looking back. "Wait." Sun Dahai seemed to have thought of something and suddenly stretched out his hand and pulled Qin Feiyang out. "What's wrong? If I don't show you some appreciation, you won't give up, right?" Qin Feiyang frowned. No, I was just joking." Sun Dahai quickly waved his hand. This kid was a gold mine, so he couldn't offend him. "Then what's the matter?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Some time ago, I received news that someone swept all the precious herbs in all the branches within 3 days. Is this person you?" Sun Dahai asked. "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "It can't be. Counting the dates, this happened on the day you entered the temple. Furthermore, the medicinal herbs you've swept away are exactly the same as the ones you've purchased from our main pavilion. Is this a coincidence?" Sun Dahai said. "Who knows?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and stepped into the portal again, disappearing without a trace. Just as he returned to his alchemy room, he received a message from Zhuge Mingyang. "What's the situation?" Zhuge Mingyang asked worriedly. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "It's fine now. What did His Highness say?" "His Highness didn't say anything. But I can see that His Highness is very happy." Zhuge Mingyang laughed. Qin Feiyang said, As long as he's happy, that's good. However, you'd better not scheme against me again, or you'll have to bear the consequences. After that, Qin Feiyang turned off the image crystal and entered the castle to continue copying the kill formula. Imperial Palace. In a certain hall, Zhuge Mingyang sat on a chair and looked at Qin Feiyang's disappearing figure with flickering eyes. When the figure completely disappeared, the first prince walked out from behind a screen. The aura he exuded was even stronger than before. Clearly, he had consumed the potential elixir, and the 9 tunes yellow dragon elixir to enter the War Master realm. Your Highness. Zhuge Mingyang stood up and cupped his fists in greeting. The first prince nodded and said, "It seems that Qin Feiyang has seen through our intentions. I told you long ago that this person's mind is not to be underestimated. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't scheme against him. Fortunately, he's not angry this time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable." Zhuge Mingyang sighed. I'm the crown prince of the great Qin Empire. So what if I scheme against him once? Afraid that he'll be angry? Isn't he afraid that I'll be angry after hearing his words? The first prince snorted coldly. He was quite dissatisfied with Qin Feiyang's previous attitude. Zhuge Mingyang couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It seemed that after opening the door of potential and stepping into the War Master realm, the first prince was a little arrogant. But why didn't he think about who gave him all of this? Since Qin Feiyang had the ability to help him, he naturally had the ability to help the other princes. Therefore, this person must not be offended. And the first prince obviously hadn't realized this point yet. He couldn't say much, otherwise, the first prince would also bear a grudge against him. In the following period of time, the Lin family and the Imperial Palace worked together to conduct a thorough investigation of the Imperial capital. Therefore, every day, the Imperial capital was in a state of panic. Those originally arrogant and despotic Marquis disciples were now unprecedentedly obedient. Those who should cultivate cultivated, and those who should do things did things. As for Qin Feiyang, ever since he returned to the alchemy room, he didn't leave the room at all. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The second stroke of the kill formula was already half done. However, the one who broke through to the 3-star War Master realm first was Wolf King. Fatso was also not far from breaking through. Lu Hong's cultivation, after many years of continuous seclusion, had finally stepped into the 8-star War Emperor, only 2 steps away from the War Master realm. The pangolin had also improved a lot. Only the black dragon snake was still in the same place. On this day, Qin Feiyang, get out here. An angry roar sounded from outside the door, startling everyone. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. This voice, it was somewhat familiar? Fatso said. It seems to be Mo Dong. That's right, it's him. Qin Feiyang nodded, retracted his arm, and closed the 6-word divine formula. Fatso frowned. His tone is a bit unfriendly. Could it be that he already knows the cause of Mo Wuxian's death? So what if he knows? Qin Feiyang laughed disdainfully. With a thought, he left the ancient castle and opened the stone door. Immediately, he saw Mo Dong standing outside angrily. Senior brother, what's the matter? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Mo Dong said angrily. Put away that hypocritical face of yours. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Senior brother, what do you mean by that? Did I offend you in any way? Still playing dumb? Did you kill my cousin Mo Wuxian? Mo Dong roared. I killed him. But he brought it upon himself. Moreover, the person I killed was him, and I didn't provoke you. Why are you so angry? Qin Feiyang said. Then, do you still remember what I once said? Don't let me know that Mo Wuxian was killed by someone, or else I will make him pay the price. Mo Dong's eyes were hazy. I remember. Qin Feiyang nodded, and said, so senior brother Mo is prepared to make a move on me. Don't think that just because you can refine the potential pill, I won't dare to make a move on you. Now I officially challenge you. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Not only was Mo Dong's attitude overbearing, even his tone was aggressive. Do you really want to do this? Is it worth it to lose your life for a despicable person? Qin Feiyang frowned. Emo Dong shouted coldly. Don't talk nonsense, just tell me if you dare or not. Why wouldn't I dare? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, But I want to ask first, who told you? If you beat me, I'll tell you. Emo Dong said. Qin Feiyang said. Then let's go. Although the temple had rules that forbade private fights, as long as both sides agreed, they could go to the fighting arena to settle their grudges. Moreover, even if he killed the other party, no one would pursue the matter. The fighting arena was located between the Pill Hall and the Martial Arts Hall. It was a plaza with a diameter of more than 10 miles. Basically, people would settle their personal grudges here every day. Because of that, in private, many disciples would be the banker here, betting on who would win and who would lose. And without a doubt, the banker was the disciple of the various martial marquis, because only they had the leisure and financial resources to do so. What a coincidence. The banker today was the son of the Qianwu marquis, Feng Yun. On the east side of the fighting arena, there was a gambling table that was more than 10 meters long. Feng Yun sat beside the gambling table with his legs crossed, looking extremely comfortable. Beside Feng Yun, there were more than 10 disciples who were counting the bets on the gambling table. These people were naturally Feng Yun's followers. As for the bets, there were gold coins, medicinal herbs, pills, etc. A moment later, Qin Feiyang and Emo Dong both walked into the fighting arena. It's Qin Feiyang. Why did he come to the fighting arena? Just now, a Pill Hall disciple sent me a message, saying that Emo Dong wants to challenge him. Who is Emo Dong? It should be the one beside him. I don't have any impression of him. Seems like he's just a small fry. A small fry dares to challenge Qin Feiyang. He really doesn't know what's good for him. Look at what you're saying. It's as if Qin Feiyang is very amazing. Although Qin Feiyang can refine the potential pill, his cultivation is only at the 2-star war ancestor level, and the aura that Emo Dong is emitting is that of a 3-star war ancestor. Indeed, the potential pill can't explain everything. Strength is the king. It's hard to say who will win and who will lose in this challenge. Upon seeing Qin Feiyang and Emo Dong, the disciples gathered around the fighting arena began to whisper. At the same time, Feng Yun, who was sitting beside the gambling table, also had a cold glint in his eyes. In the arena, there were also 2 people dueling at this moment. Both of their strengths were 3-star war ancestor level. It was very exciting. But at this moment, no one paid attention to them. Their attention was all on Qin Feiyang. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also noticed Feng Yun. However, he only glanced at him hurriedly before moving his gaze away. He looked at the 2 people fighting in the arena with interest. This action undoubtedly made Feng Yun even more angry. No matter what, he was still the son of a martial marquis and the controller of the first floor of the Pill Hall. Shouldn't he at least greet him when he saw him? He turned his head to look at the person beside him and said, Go and invite Qin Feiyang over. The word invite was said with gritted teeth. That follower smiled flatteringly and immediately ran towards Qin Feiyang. On the other side of the crowd, there was a face that Qin Feiyang was very familiar with. It was Wan Qiu. At this moment, he was also looking at Qin Feiyang with a cold smile. Soon, that follower ran to Qin Feiyang's side and smiled flatteringly. Senior apprentice brother Qin. Senior apprentice brother Feng Yun invites you over. This person's cultivation was the same as Qin Feiyang. They were both 2-star war ancestor level. But facing Qin Feiyang, who was at the peak of his power, he didn't dare to be as arrogant as Feng Yun. Qin Feiyang looked at Feng Yun indifferently and said, Tell him that if he wants me to go over, he should come and invite me over himself. That follower didn't know what to do. When he said those words, Qin Feiyang did not deliberately lower his voice. Thus, the surrounding people all heard him. Chapter 7:11. To actually let the son of a martial marquis personally invite him? After these few months of understanding, they all knew that Qin Feiyang was a very arrogant person, but they never thought that he would be arrogant to such an extent. At the same time, Feng Yun also suddenly stood up and stared angrily at Qin Feiyang. However, Qin Feiyang completely ignored him. One of them said in a low voice, Senior brother Feng, Since he doesn't give you any face, do you want us to go and take care of him? Feng Yun said angrily. He has Zhuge Mingyang as his backer. What are you going to use to take care of him? That person immediately lowered his head with a face full of panic. Just hearing about Zhuge Mingyang scared him to this extent. What a waste. Feng Yun snorted coldly, slightly sorted out his state of mind, and walked towards Qin Feiyang. He actually went to personally invite him. Seeing this, the surrounding people all felt that it was inconceivable. Everyone knew that Qin Feiyang had Zhuge Mingyang as his backer. But Feng Yun was still the son of a martial marquis, so there was no need for him to be so spineless, right? Walking forward, Feng Yun cupped his hands and smiled. Brother Qin, why are you free to come to the fighting arena today? A moment ago, he still had an angry look on his face, but now he had become amiable and approachable. The speed at which he turned hostile made even the surrounding crowd sigh. Qin Feiyang also pulled out a smile and said, Isn't Brother Feng asking the obvious? Feng Yun glanced at Mo Dong, then looked at Qin Feiyang and laughed. What a coincidence today. It's Brother Qin's first time in the fighting arena, and it's my turn to be the banker. I wonder if Brother Qin can give me some face and place a bet. Brother Feng's face, how could I not give it? Qin Feiyang laughed. Feng Yun looked at Mo Dong again and asked, Brother, are you interested in gambling as well? Of course. Mo Dong nodded, turned around and walked towards the gambling table. Feng Yun smiled brightly, retreated to the side and extended his hand. Brother Qin, please. Please. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Seeing the two of them chatting and laughing as they walked towards the gambling table like old friends, the surrounding people couldn't help but look at each other. Were all these big shots so fickle? Mo Dong came to the gambling table and placed his Cosmos sack on the table. He said, This is all I have. I'm betting on myself. Feng Yun was astonished, then he smiled and said, Looks like Brother Mo Dong is very confident in himself. What about you, Brother Qin? Me. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and was about to speak. But at this moment, Feng Yun suddenly moved closer to Qin Feiyang's ear and said, How about this, let's make a bet. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, What agreement? Feng Yun sent a voice transmission. If you win, everything on this table will belong to you. But if you lose, you will follow His Highness the Second Prince. Second Prince? Qin Feiyang looked at Feng Yun strangely. If he remembered correctly, this person used to follow the 13th Prince? The 13th Prince had just died a month ago, and he had already changed masters? I know what you're thinking. Actually, you're right. The 13th Prince doesn't treat me as one of his people, so even if he's not dead, I won't follow him anymore. Feng Yun thought to himself. Impressive. Qin Feiyang gave him a thumbs up, but with a hint of sarcasm. Feng Yun didn't mind and sent a voice transmission. How about it? Do you dare to bet? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Suddenly, he noticed that there was something strange about Mo Dong's expression that couldn't be explained. I understand. So all of this was planned by you guys. Qin Feiyang suddenly realized. Feng Yun and Mo Dong looked at each other with a trace of shock in their eyes. That's right. They had planned this all along. Mo Dong actually didn't dare to challenge Qin Feiyang, because the current Qin Feiyang wasn't someone he could afford to offend. He wasn't stupid either. There was no need to offend Qin Feiyang for a dead person. The reason why he dared to challenge him was that Feng Yun and the second prince were backing him up. But they didn't tell anyone about this. But they didn't expect that it would be so easy for Qin Feiyang to see through it. At this moment, they really wanted to break open Qin Feiyang's head and see what was inside. Looking at their expressions, Qin Feiyang knew that he had guessed correctly. He sighed. I have to admit, you guys really put in a lot of effort. Feng Yun asked secretly. Then are you going to bet or not? Why wouldn't I bet on such a good thing? But if I win, I don't want your so-called wealth. As long as you kneel down and kowtow to me in front of everyone in the fighting arena, Qin Feiyang said as he looked at Feng Yun. Furthermore, this sentence was not said through sound transmission. Everyone around could hear it clearly. He actually wants to kowtow? What are they betting on? The stakes are so high? Everyone was bewildered. Feng Yun's face also darkened. Qin Feiyang said it in front of everyone. It was obvious that he wanted to embarrass him. Mo Dong looked at Qin Feiyang with disdain and sent a sound transmission. Senior brother Feng, don't be afraid, I have confidence. Really? Feng Yun asked secretly. Definitely win. Mo Dong replied without hesitation, full of confidence. All right. I'll believe you this time. But if you lose, even if Qin Feiyang doesn't kill you, I will. Feng Yun secretly said, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, all right, I'll bet with you. Following that, he raised his head and looked at the two people fighting in the arena, and shouted, hurry up, don't delay this young master's business. When the two of them heard this, their necks immediately shrunk. They simply stopped fighting and left the fighting arena. At least you know what's good for you. Feng Yun sneered and looked at Qin Feiyang and Mo Dong. The two of you go on stage. Mo Dong stepped on the ground, leaped high into the air, and landed on the fighting arena. He then turned around and looked at Qin Feiyang provocatively. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, without any fancy movement technique. He walked onto the fighting arena step by step. Everyone, this is a rare opportunity. Hurry up and place your bets. Qin Feiyang 1-5, Mo Dong 1-2. It was also at this moment that a loud shout sounded out from the crowd. Qin Feiyang looked towards the source of the voice, only to see Wuxia walking out from the crowd. With a cold smile on his face, he walked towards Feng Yun. You told Mo Dong? Qin Feiyang frowned. In fact, he had already vaguely guessed that it was Wuxia, but he wasn't sure because Feng Wuxia and the others knew about this. Who else could it be other than me? Wuxia walked to Feng Yun's side and grinned. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, you think it's honorable to do this, don't you? The winner takes all. What does it matter? Wuxia shrugged. The winner takes all. That's right, but unfortunately, you'll never become the king. Because you'll only be a servant for the rest of your life. Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully and turned to walk towards Mo Dong. Wuxia immediately clenched his fists, his eyes frighteningly dark. Let's begin. Qin Feiyang walked to the opposite side of Mo Dong and said indifferently. Mo Dong said, wait a moment, there are still many people who haven't placed their bets. Heh, it seems that you're very confident in yourself. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Whether I'm confident or not, won't you find out later? Mo Dong said with a smile. Birds of a feather flock together. Qin Feiyang sneered, then looked at the hesitant crowd around the gambling table and said, everyone, if you believe me, bet on me to win. I guarantee that you'll make a lot of money. So domineering? The crowd looked at each other. All right. I'll bet all my wealth on Qin Feiyang. I'll bet on him too. I'll bet all my wealth too. In an instant, everyone began to place their bets. Feng Yun was also full of smiles. The bigger the bets these people placed, the more he earned. Mo Dong was so confident that he didn't expect Mo Dong to lose at all. After a full hour, the crowd finally dispersed. On the gambling table, there was a mountainous pile of Qingquan bags. Furthermore, most of them were betting on Qin Feiyang to win. Only a small portion of them bet on Mo Dong to win. Qin Feiyang glanced at the Qingquan bags, his eyes revealing a bone-piercing coldness. This time, not only would he make Feng Yun lose face, he would also make Marquis Qianwu go bankrupt. Because there were too many bets. According to the odds of 1-5, even with Marquis Qianwu's wealth, he wouldn't be able to bear it. We can begin now. Mo Dong opened his mouth and laughed. At the same time as he opened his mouth, his aura exploded. Come. Qin Feiyang flicked his sleeves and placed his hands behind his back, revealing a look of contempt. Be serious. I'm betting all my wealth. I can't lose. This action caused the people below the stage to begin to worry. Mo Dong's eyes were brimming with anger. In the fighting arena, regardless of life or death, be aware. He roared angrily, his battle chi surging, cutting through a huge wave and pouncing towards Qin Feiyang. The terrifying aura was like an avalanche, pouncing in all directions. You're the one who should be aware. Qin Feiyang muttered. He raised his hand and pointed at the air. An invisible force roaring out. The third move of the void returning art, splitting space. These 3 moves were equivalent to the power of a high-grade battle art. Coupled with Qin Feiyang's current cultivation of a 2-star war master, it was comparable to a 5-star war master's lethality. As for Mo Dong, although he was a 3-star war master, he did not use any battle arts and only used ordinary attacks. How could he block Qin Feiyang's move? There was no suspense. Wherever the invisible force passed, the battle chi would disintegrate, unable to withstand a single blow. Following that invisible force pounced towards Mo Dong. However, although Qin Feiyang had the upper hand from the start, the people below the stage were even more worried. Because in their opinion, using a battle art from the start was a sign of lack of confidence. So, those who bet on Qin Feiyang could not help but regret it at this moment. Mo Dong also had a disdainful look on his face as he said, "I heard from Wan Qiu that you have mastered several perfect battle arts. Hurry up and show them to me." As he spoke, he took a step forward and his speed suddenly increased. He actually calmly avoided the attack of the invisible force. An auxiliary battle art? Qin Feiyang muttered. However, judging from Mo Dong's speed, it should only be a high-grade auxiliary battle art. It was nothing to worry about. Since that's the case, then I'll do as you wish. A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes as he pointed his index finger in the air. The 4th level of the Void Returning art, the Void Returning, attacked. At this moment, the fighting arena began to tremble violently. The invisible force was like a terrifying python, roaring in the sky and intimidating all directions. It really is a perfect battle art. Looks like there's still hope. Chapter 7:12. There's hope. You're too naive. Mo Dong glanced at the crowd below the field, his eyes full of sarcasm. Boom. He put his hands in front of his chest and quickly formed a seal. A destructive aura suddenly rushed out from his hands. Mountain-toppling seal. At the same time, a palm-sized khaki square seal broke through the air from his hands. The square seal expanded with the wind. At last, it was like a towering mountain, lying above Qin Feiyang's head, exuding a shocking aura. Some of the people below the field couldn't help but retreat in horror. Qin Feiyang, this is the temple, not the spiritual state. You don't have the right to be arrogant. Kill. Mo Dong roared, and the mountain-toppling seal suddenly sank, crashing into the invisible force with irresistible force. Boom. An earth-shaking loud noise suddenly exploded. For a moment, the wind whistled in this place, and the void was distorted. Qin Feiyang immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and his feet kept retreating. Mo Dong's body and mind were also trembling, and he kept retreating. Bang. He stepped on the ground and steadied his body. Then he rushed up to the sky and looked down at Qin Feiyang condescendingly. See, I only need to use a high-tier battle art to force you to retreat. Admit defeat, and you'll be spared from physical pain. Not only was his tone full of disdain, but even his eyes were contemptuous to the extreme, as if he was looking down at an ant. Admit defeat? Qin Feiyang lifted the corner of his mouth. Stubborn. Mo Dong snorted, and his khaki battle aura emerged like a torrent. A giant hand that blotted out the sky appeared in the blink of an eye. Boom. Immediately, the giant hand with the power to destroy the world rushed toward Qin Feiyang. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang narrowed his eyes slightly. This was also a superior battle technique. Whoosh. But instead of dodging, he took the initiative to meet it. Is he courting death? I regret it, I shouldn't have bet on him. The crowd below widened their eyes, and some even cried out sadly. A bright smile hung on Feng Yun's face. Although Qin Feiyang had mastered a perfect battle technique, the difference in cultivation was not something that could be easily made up for. Mo Dong would definitely win this battle. Clang. But at this moment, around Qin Feiyang, a crimson-red sword chi emerged. Then it condensed into 2 sword shadows which swept in all directions. Go. Following closely, Qin Feiyang waved his hand. 2 sword shadows soared into the sky and slashed at the giant hand. With a rumble, the giant hand disintegrated. Puff. High up in the sky, Missouri Dong's body also trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood that dyed the sky red. Another perfect battle art? The crowd below was dumbfounded. In addition to the previous battle art, he had actually mastered 2 perfect slaughter battle arts. Wuxia frowned and said in a low voice, "Senior brother Feng, I told you not to underestimate him." "I'm fine." Feng Yun waved his hand indifferently, but he was actually a little worried. At this moment, Qin Feiyang had already rushed up to the sky and stood in the air with Mo Dong. Mo Dong wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "Not bad, you can still block my attack." Qin Feiyang frowned slightly and said impatiently, "Don't waste time, use all your means." "So impatient? Then let me tell you. Today I will take my time and slowly torture you." After saying that, Mo Dong took a step forward. Using a mysterious footwork, battle chi surged all over his body. Like a meteor, he charged towards Qin Feiyang. "Torture me?" Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. He used phantom steps and charged forward, unwilling to be outdone. Bang bang bang. Rumble. The two immediately launched an endless battle high up in the sky. Their fists and feet collided with a deafening sound. Mo Dong's speed is fast enough, but Qin Feiyang's speed is not inferior at all. It seems that he has mastered a perfect auxiliary battle art. 3 perfect battle arts. Is this guy really from the spiritual state? Are there so many battle arts in the spiritual state? Many people found it inconceivable. Not good. Qin Feiyang is only a 2-star battle grandmaster. He is no match for Mo Dong in a head-on battle. Yeah, why is he so stupid? Why did he make such a choice? Those who had bet all their wealth couldn't help but worry. And Qin Feiyang was indeed being suppressed by Mo Dong at this moment. The difference in realms made him helpless. Soon, his entire body was dripping with blood. "Do you know the difference between us? If it weren't for the second prince's order, I would have already killed you." Mo Dong sneered. At the same time, he punched towards Qin Feiyang's chest. Qin Feiyang said, "Then shouldn't I thank you for not killing me?" At the same time, he also punched out. The 2 fists collided with a loud bang. Qin Feiyang's arm was instantly lacerated and blood splattered. Mo Dong's arm was a little numb. He turned around and quickly circled behind Qin Feiyang like a ghost, slapping his palm on Qin Feiyang's back. This palm contained his full strength. Bang! Qin Feiyang immediately swooped down like a meteorite and smashed into the hard ground of the arena. Puff! Blood gushed out of his mouth. Seeing this, most of the people outside the arena felt their hearts sink to the bottom. They were all muttering in their hearts, "It's over. Qin Feiyang got us killed." And those who bet on Mo Dong had a smile on their faces with a trace of disdain. This Qin Feiyang, other than refining the potential elixir in the meeting, didn't have anything special about him. Mo Dong, Wuxia, and Feng Yun also smiled victoriously. Swish. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang stood up, wiped the blood off his face, looked around at the crowd and smiled. "Sorry to make you worry." He's about to lose, how can he still smile? The crowd was a little angry. Feng Yun kindly advised, "Brother Qin, if you can't hold on, just admit defeat. Don't force yourself too much. Yeah, after all, Mo Dong is a small realm higher than you. It's not shameful to lose," Wuxia said with a smile. But he was quite angry in his heart. Why did he lose to such a trash before? Admit defeat? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, looked up at Mo Dong and asked, "Are you ready?" Mo Dong raised his eyebrows. What did he mean? The others were also suspicious. Someone suddenly said, "Could it be that he was just warming up before?" Warming up? Damn, is this guy crazy? Using this kind of life and death battle to warm up? Everyone was dumbfounded. This person was indeed crazy. Boom. At that moment, a torrential battle intent surged out of Qin Feiyang's body and shook the clouds. In just an instant, his long black hair and eyes turned blood red. "This is..." Wuxia narrowed his eyes and shouted, "Mo Dong, his transformation is very strange. Be careful." Strange. Mo Dong sized up Qin Feiyang and shook his head. "I can't tell. Are you trying to scare me? You'd better listen to him." Qin Feiyang grinned. Like a divine rainbow, he charged into the sky like a bolt of lightning and charged directly at Mo Dong. Boom. Bang. The 2 of them fought again. Mo Dong felt that something was wrong the moment they exchanged blows. At that moment, Qin Feiyang was like a god of war who had descended to the mortal world. Although his cultivation realm was lower than his, the power of every punch could push him back. On the other hand, Qin Feiyang did not take a step back no matter how serious the blow was. The more he fought, the braver and fiercer he became. Moreover, his entire body was emitting an astonishing pressure. He felt as if a towering mountain was in front of him, and could not help but panic. 10 breaths passed. Qin Feiyang suddenly punched Mo Dong's lower abdomen. Mo Dong screamed in pain, and was blasted into the sky on the spot. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang's eyes were like lightning as he rushed up and stepped on Mo Dong's back again. Puff! Immediately, Mo Dong spat out a mouthful of blood. Like a giant rock, he shot downwards. Bang! In an instant, he smashed into the ground of the fighting arena with a deafening sound. Ah! The intense pain from his entire body made him grimace and howl in pain. This. Seeing this scene, the crowd below the arena was so shocked that they could not close their mouths. The situation was reversed just like that? Was this a dream? Good job. Kill him quickly. Those who bet on Qin Feiyang were extremely excited, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Mo Dong, what are you doing? Hurry up and stand up. At the same time, Feng Yun's face was calm as he looked at Qin Feiyang, who was standing high in the sky, and shouted angrily. Mo Dong, you can't lose. Get up and beat him up. Those who bet on Mo Dong also roared one after another, because there were many people who bet all their assets and absolutely could not lose. Shut up, all of you. Hearing these roars, Mo Dong's face that was close to the ground crawled up with an astonishing hostility. Suddenly, he roared, suddenly got up and rushed into the sky. At the same time, in his eyes, murderous intent burst out as he stared at Qin Feiyang and said word by word, I will make you pay the price. Boom. He formed a seal with both hands and a palm-sized square seal was condensed again. But unlike the previous mountain-turning seal, this square seal shone brightly as soon as it appeared. Moreover, there was a trace of blood qi lingering around it. The aura it emitted was also much stronger than the mountain-turning seal. This is the perfect battle art. He has no family background and no background. How could he have a perfect battle art? Could he have gotten it from the martial arts treasury? Impossible. There are indeed perfect battle arts in the martial arts treasury of the Divine Hall, but so far, there are pitifully few people who are lucky enough to get a perfect battle art. Yes, it's so strange. Everyone was discussing. This guy is really something. Feng Yun smiled happily. Wan Qiu looked at Feng Yun, then at Mo Dong, and finally looked up at Qin Feiyang. He mumbled, Can a perfect battle art really kill him? Because he did not see any nervousness on Qin Feiyang's face. He was still calm and unperturbed. Whoosh! Mo Dong landed in front of Qin Feiyang with the square seal and sneered. Are you scared now? Am I? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Stop pretending. No one will say anything even if you're scared. After all, your strength is in front of you. But I have to thank you. Mo Dong smiled. Thank you? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. That was strange. Mo Dong sent a voice transmission. It's normal that you don't know because even Feng Yun was kept in the dark. In fact, this perfect battle art was given to me by the second prince to deal with you. Qin Feiyang was stunned. The second prince was truly generous. He was even willing to give out a perfect battle art. Mo Dong sent another voice transmission. The second prince also said that if you continue to be stubborn, he will use this perfect battle art to kill you in the arena. Kill me? Chapter 713. If he couldn't get it, he would get rid of it. This second prince was too vicious. Qin Feiyang said. There's a story circulating among the people. I wonder if you've heard of it. What story? Mo Dong frowned. There was once a person who raised a dog. The person who raised the dog gave it good food and drink, and the dog was very loyal and obedient to its owner. But in the end, the person who raised the dog let it bite a very powerful enemy. In the end, the dog died in the hands of the person who was bitten. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. You're courting death. Mo Dong's eyes were filled with killing intent. Qin Feiyang's words were obviously saying that he was a dog beside the second prince. I'm not done yet. Until the moment of its death, the dog still didn't understand. Why would its master want it to bite such a powerful enemy? Actually, its owner didn't care about it at all. And these it will never think of, Qin Feiyang said. You deserve to die. Mo Dong was furious. Actually, I'm not saying this to humiliate you, but to remind you. Loyalty is not wrong, but it depends on the right person. Don't be used by others in the end and think that you've taken advantage of them. That's stupidity, Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Boom. Mo Dong's body was filled with killing intent, and he couldn't listen at all. Overturning the sky seal kill. With his angry roar, the square seal suddenly expanded in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it was like a giant mountain, surrounded by scarlet blood qi, emitting a terrifying aura. Following closely, the overturning the sky seal shook the sky, and with an ear-piercing sound of wind and thunder, it blasted towards Qin Feiyang. Overturning the sky seal? In my opinion, it might not be able to overturn the sky. Qin Feiyang's eyes shone with a bloody light, as if a sea of blood was floating. Clang. Scarlet sword qi surged. 28 sword shadows instantly appeared in the sky. The number of Guyuan sword technique depended on a person's cultivation. In the War King realm, one could condense 10 sword shadows. In the War Emperor realm, one could condense 20 of them. Right now, Qin Feiyang had already stepped into the War Master and was able to condense 30 sword images. Previously, he had used 2, so there were only 28 sword shadows left. With a wave of his hand, 28 sword shadows pierced through the sky and slashed at the sky, flipping seal one after another. Clang. Rumble. In an instant, high up in the sky, sparks flew everywhere. A series of deafening explosions took place, like rolling thunder. That terrifying sharpness swept across the sky. Boom. In the end, accompanied by a particularly deafening sound, the 28 sword shadows and the heaven-flipping seal turned into ashes at the same time. Pooh. Mo Dong also spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated repeatedly. However, Qin Feiyang had the battle secret art to protect his body. Like Mount Tai, he stood firmly in the void without moving. I'll go. Isn't Qin Feiyang's battle prowess too terrifying? The crowd below was dumbstruck. Although both of them had perfect battle arts, one had to know that Mo Dong's cultivation was one small realm higher than Qin Feiyang's. Originally, everyone thought that Mo Dong would defeat Qin Feiyang as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. However, they did not expect that the result would be Qin Feiyang's victory. Actually, relatively speaking, Qin Feiyang's perfect battle art is better, because the power of each sword shadow is equivalent to a perfect battle art. Someone said in a deep voice with a serious tone. This was an extremely tyrannical existence, enough to dominate the same realm. At the same time, Feng Yun's expression also changed and he said angrily, with a perfect battle art, you still can't take him down, what are you doing? Ever since Qin Feiyang activated the battle secret art, Mo Dong had never had the upper hand. If this continued, the one who lost in the end might really be Mo Dong. And once Mo Dong lost, he would have to kneel down and kowtow to Qin Feiyang in front of everyone. He would never do such a shameful thing. Mo Dong stabilized his body, lowered his head to look at Feng Yun, and then looked at Qin Feiyang. Like a mad beast, his face was distorted and extremely ferocious. Qin Feiyang sighed. It seems that you still don't understand the story I told you just now. I understand, but I have no choice. Because if I don't kill you, the second prince will kill me. This is the sorrow of a small character like me. My fate is my own, but it is in the hands of others. Mo Dong transmitted his voice. There was a trace of deep helplessness in his tone. You asked for it. If you didn't go to the second prince and didn't get involved in this muddy water, how would you end up in this situation? Qin Feiyang said, not sympathizing with Mo Dong. Yes. I asked for it. So I must go on. After saying that, Mo Dong's eyes became incomparably firm. Boom. His figure shuddered as a shocking aura burst out from his body, like an erupting volcano. Then, a behemoth rushed out from behind him. As soon as this thing appeared, a faint dragon aura emerged between heaven and earth. Dragon? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Mo Dong's fighting soul was a yellow dragon that was dozens of feet long. Its whole body seemed to be cast from stone, and it exuded an extremely terrifying aura. I know you will definitely not let me go. So now, I will fight with all my strength. Even if I die, I will die with dignity. Mo Dong transmitted his voice, and his hands formed a seal. The overturning sky seal appeared again. Come on. Today either you die or I die. He roared fiercely and rushed toward Qin Feiyang with the overturning sky seal and the dragon fighting soul. The destructive aura shrouded all directions. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Mo Dong's performance at the last moment was worthy of the title of a man. In the face of a worthy opponent, he would naturally go all out. Whoosh! He stepped into the air step by step. That terrifying speed was like lightning moving, leaving behind countless afterimages. In the blink of an eye, the two met with a loud bang. Mo Dong waved his hand, and the dragon fighting soul and the overturning sky seal suddenly shook the sky and blasted toward Qin Feiyang. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also stretched out his arm. Golden light burst out from his palm, and he slapped. Boom. Whoa. Immediately, the overturning sky seal and the dragon fighting soul turned in the air and blasted Mo Dong behind. Ah! Accompanied by a painful scream, Mo Dong's physical body was torn apart on the spot, and blood stained the sky. How is this possible? The crowd below looked at Qin Feiyang with bewilderment. He actually bounced the fighting soul and the overturning sky seal back. How did he do it? Haha, 1 to 5. This time I made a big profit. The next moment, the fighting arena was in an uproar. The people who were betting on Qin Feiyang couldn't help but cheer. Feng Yun, on the other hand, collapsed powerlessly. Wan Qiu also had a look of horror on his face. This person was indeed not easy to deal with. Giving yourself a taste of your own medicine is really a magical battle art. In the distance, Zhuge Mingyang stood on top of a big tree, looking at Qin Feiyang from afar, muttering to himself. There was also a smile on his face. Then he turned around and broke through the air, quickly disappearing. At the same time, in other directions, there were also more than a dozen young people paying attention to Qin Feiyang. These people were men and women. Their temperaments were extraordinary, and their auras were unfathomable. But no one appeared. After the battle between Qin Feiyang and Mo Dong ended, they left silently. Phew! High up in the sky, Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, stopped circulating the battle character art, and his appearance quickly returned to normal. Then, he lowered his head to look at Feng Yun, like a king overlooking his subjects, and said, "Kneel." Feng Yun stuttered. He raised his head to look at Qin Feiyang, and transmitted his voice. "Can you leave me some face?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "Face is earned by oneself, not given by others. Don't go too far." Feng Yun suddenly stood up and said angrily. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "It's you who are going too far, not me. Hurry up, I don't have time to waste with you." Someone said disdainfully, "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. If you want to kneel, then kneel." Feng Yun immediately looked at that person. His gaze was bone-chilling. That person immediately shrunk his neck, lowered his head, and did not dare to make a sound. Plop! Feng Yun also gritted his teeth, kneeled on the ground, and hit his forehead on the ground. He finally saw through it. No matter what he said today, Qin Feiyang would not change his mind. If he continued to beg, it would only be more humiliating. Swoosh! Qin Feiyang looked at him coldly, then turned around and streaked across the sky, quickly disappearing in the direction of the pill hall. "Bastard, I will definitely make you pay the price." Feng Yun also stood up. Looking at Qin Feiyang's back, his eyes flashed with a shocking murderous intent. However, the show had just begun. As soon as Qin Feiyang left, those who were escorting Qin Feiyang swarmed towards Feng Yun. Feng Yun was so angry that he was about to go crazy. Not only did he lose all his face, but he was also going to lose all his fortune. "Senior Feng Yun, are you going to go back on your word? When it concerned their own interests, those disciples also became tough. What a joke. Do I, Fengyan, look like someone who would go back on his word? It's just that there are too many of them. Give me some time to prepare. Fengyan said angrily. Someone said, then you should at least give a specific time, right? 3 days. 3 days later, go to my alchemy room to get it. I will compensate you however much you lose. As soon as Fengyan finished speaking, he flew into the air and returned to his alchemy room. Damn it. As soon as he walked into the alchemy room, he flew into a rage and was about to go crazy. After a long time, he finally calmed down and took out the image crystal. Soon, a young man in a golden robe appeared in the void in front of him. This person was about 1.8 meters tall, with good facial features and an extraordinary bearing. Below the corner of his mouth, there was a black mole the size of a mung bean, which was very eye-catching. And the golden robe on his body was embroidered with a lifelike python. Fengyan cupped his hands and said, Greetings, Your Highness. That's right. This person was the second prince. The second prince asked with a smile. Have you done what I asked you to do? I failed. Emodong was killed by Qin Feiyang. Fengyan lowered his head and said, What? The second prince was furious and shouted, I even gave him the perfect battle art, and he still failed. Fengyan was slightly stunned and asked, You gave him the perfect battle art? That's right. I thought that with the perfect battle art, he would be able to defeat Qin Feiyang, but I didn't expect him to be so useless. The second prince snorted coldly. Emodong isn't a talent to begin with. Why are you nurturing him like this? Fengyan frowned and was puzzled. Do you think I'm really nurturing him? I'm just using him. The second prince smiled disdainfully. Your Highness, even if you're using him, you should find a reliable one. You don't know, but I was screwed by him this time. Chapter 7:14. What's wrong? The second prince looked at him suspiciously. Fengyan immediately recounted what had happened earlier in detail. So that's how it is. The second prince nodded his head in realization. The compensation this time is too big. If my family finds out, they will definitely not let me off easily. So I hope that Your Highness can help me think of a way. Fengyan pleaded. This was his real purpose for looking for the second prince. The second prince hesitated for a moment and shook his head. You know that I've been competing with my brothers for the potential pill recently, so I really can't help. On the surface, it sounded nice, but in fact he was sneering in his heart. He didn't even do what he asked him to do, and he still wanted him to pay? What a daydream. Your Highness, I'm working for you now, can't you help me? Fengyan was anxious. I want to help you too, but there's nothing I can do. You have to think of another way. After the second prince finished speaking, he directly turned off the image crystal. All of you are bastards. Fengyan was so angry that he roared in the alchemy room. And then there was Qin Feiyang. Returning to the alchemy room, he consumed a healing pill and prepared to head to the Fragrant Moon Inn. Buzz. Suddenly, the image crystal rang. He took it out and saw that it was the first prince. The first prince looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile and said, Brother Qin, the previous battle was really amazing. Qin Feiyang laughed. I didn't expect Your Highness to receive the news so quickly. In the temple, as long as it's something I want to know, no one can hide it from me. And this time, you did very well. Not only did you suppress my second brother's arrogance, you also caused the Qianwu Marquis family to suffer heavy losses. Tell me, what reward do you want? The first prince smiled in relief. Reward? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and he said with a faint smile, It's just a small matter, forget about the reward. This matter is indeed nothing, but my 13th brother's matter is not a small matter. Just say it. As long as I can satisfy you, I will satisfy you, the first prince said. In that case, Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment and said, I'm very interested in the Imperial Palace and want to take a look. What do you think? That won't do. The eldest prince shook his head. Why? Qin Feiyang furrowed his brows and asked. You'll definitely be interrogated by the guards if you come to the Imperial Palace. If you take out the Crown Prince token, Won't our relationship be exposed? The first prince said. That makes sense. Qin Feiyang nodded. The first prince smiled and said, so just bear with it for now. There will be plenty of time in the future. There will be opportunities in the future. Yes, Qin Feiyang responded. Although she was eager to see her mother, some things couldn't be rushed. After pondering for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, then your highness, please bestow upon me a few perfect battle arts. How many types? The first prince's face twitched and said helplessly, the imperial palace does not lack perfect battle arts, but they are not cabbages. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, then I don't know what to ask for. Just give it to me. The first prince thought for a moment and said with a smile, aren't you an alchemist? Then I'll give you a 5th grade cauldron. A 5th grade cauldron. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. The cauldrons he had now were all 4th grade cauldrons, and could still be used. But when the Nether Devil Flame was upgraded to the 6th grade, these 4th grade cauldrons would be useless. Because a cauldron would explode if he didn't control it well. Therefore a 5th grade cauldron was a good choice. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, thank you, your highness. It's fine. I'll ask Zhuge Mingyang to send it to you later. During this period, you'd better behave and not attract too much attention. Because as far as I know, the invincible Black Army hasn't given up their suspicion of you. The first prince warned. Still suspecting me? Qin Feiyang frowned. The first prince nodded and said, yes, so you must be careful. I know. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then that's it. The first prince smiled, and the phantom image quickly dissipated. Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal and frowned. Originally, he planned to go to the Fragrant Moon Brothel and find the owner of the Fragrant Moon Brothel to see if he could get the 5th grade cauldron fire. But now it seemed that he couldn't go to the Fragrant Moon Brothel for the time being. Because, once the people of the Imperial Palace received the news, it wouldn't be as simple as suspicion. At that time, he might even be captured and tortured. In less than half an hour, Zhuge Mingyang came with the cauldron. This cauldron was scarlet red, as if it was cast from magma, and a lifelike dragon was engraved on it. According to Zhuge Mingyang, this cauldron was called the Jiao Dragon Cauldron, and it was one of the best among the 5th grade cauldrons. Qin Feiyang thanked Zhuge Mingyang and sent him away. After Qin Feiyang dripped blood on it, he also took the Jiao Dragon Cauldron into the castle, and continued to copy the kill formula. At the same time, in the first prince's palace, the first prince looked down at Zhuge Mingyang and asked, is he satisfied with the cauldron? I don't know. Because his expression is extremely calm, I really can't guess what he's thinking. Zhuge Mingyang shook his head. If he's not satisfied with the 5th grade cauldron, then he's too greedy. Greedy people can't be kept alive. The first prince sneered. Zhuge Mingyang frowned as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't say it. After a moment of silence, a glint flashed across the first prince's eyes as he asked, don't you think we should do something? What do you mean? Zhuge Mingyang looked at him suspiciously. Right now, the invincible Black Army is still suspicious of Qin Feiyang. If we don't get rid of this problem quickly, I'm afraid that Qin Feiyang will accidentally reveal a flaw and implicate us. The first prince said worriedly. Although the 13th prince was killed by Qin Feiyang, they also had accomplices. If this matter was exposed, they would more or less be affected. Zhuge Mingyang's pupils shrank when he heard this. He said in surprise, Your Highness, you're not planning to kill him, are you? Kill him? The first prince was taken aback. He shook his head and said with a smile, Qin Feiyang is too valuable. How could I bear to kill him? Then Your Highness, what do you mean? Zhuge Mingyang was puzzled. The first prince said, I mean to find a scapegoat. As long as the culprit is caught, the invincible Black Army will naturally not suspect Qin Feiyang. A scapegoat. Zhuge Mingyang pondered for a while and said with a smile, Your Highness is wise. I'll take care of this. You must do it well. Don't make any mistakes. The first prince said. Don't worry. As long as you're willing to pay the price, there will naturally be someone willing to be the scapegoat. Zhuge Mingyang smiled confidently. In less than 3 days, An explosive piece of news spread throughout the capital city. The culprit who murdered the 13th prince and Lin Dian had been caught. Moreover, he had been executed by the invincible Black Army's commander. On the same day, Lu Xingqian found Qin Feiyang. Alchemy Room 701. The stone door was tightly shut. Lu Xingqian waved his hand. 2 chairs and a tea table appeared on the ground. Lu Xingqian sat on one of the chairs and looked at Qin Feiyang. He said with a smile, "Sit down and talk." As he spoke, he took out a tea set. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Xingqian in confusion. He sat opposite Lu Xingqian and asked, "What's going on?" "Just now, I heard something very interesting," Lu Xingqian said with a smile while making tea. "What is it?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Lu Xingqian said with a smile, "The real culprit, who murdered the 13th prince and Lin Dian, has been caught and executed." Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Wasn't he the real culprit? Isn't he still alive and well?" "I guessed it. You're a cultivation maniac." Lu Xingqian shook his head and said with a smile. "What's going on? Who's the real culprit they caught?" Qin Feiyang urged. Lu Xingqian took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "You'll never know who this real culprit is. Hurry up and tell me. Don't keep me in suspense." Qin Feiyang said impatiently. Lu Xingqian put down the teacup and said with a serious face, "The deacon elder who guards the martial arts hall." "How is that possible?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "I'm also very confused." But this deacon elder had already confessed in front of the commander of the invincible Black Army that it was because the 13th prince and Lin Dian discovered his secret that he killed them. As for what the secret was, the elder didn't say it until he died. The Lin clan also wanted to ask him for the 5th grade alchemy fire, but they didn't get it. According to the elder's confession, the alchemy fire was destroyed by him. Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang said, "Nonsense. He's not the real culprit. Where did the alchemy fire come from? Where did the secret come from? It's just a fabricated motive." "I know that. But the strange thing is, why did he take the blame?" Lu Xingqian said. "Yes, why?" Qin Feiyang lowered his head and was also very puzzled. Murdering a prince was a capital offense. Others would try to avoid it, but this person actually took the initiative to take the blame? Did he want to die? But there were other ways to die. Lu Xingqian suddenly said, "I think there's a plot behind this." "Plot?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. "Buzz." At this moment, Qin Feiyang's image crystal stone rang. "I'll leave for a moment." Lu Xingqian stood up and walked to the corner beside the stone door. Qin Feiyang took out the image crystal stone suspiciously and poured his battle qi into it. Zhuge Mingyang's shadow immediately appeared. Zhuge Mingyang said with a smile, "Brother Qin, have you heard the news that the real culprit has appeared?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Looking at the smile on Zhuge Mingyang's face, he seemed to understand something and asked, "You're the one behind this?" "Brother Qin, you're really insightful. I can't hide anything from you." Zhuge Mingyang smiled slightly. "The culprit is a deacon elder of the Divine Hall. I can't believe he was willing to be the scapegoat. Brother Zhuge, I have to admit that you're really good." Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Compared to Brother Qin, what is this little scheme of mine? I'm sending you a message to inform you that you don't have to hide anything in the future." Zhuge Mingyang said. "Do I need to hide anything? Besides, you're not doing this just for me, but also for yourself." Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. "It doesn't matter whether it's for me or for you. The important thing is that the problem has been solved, isn't it? Well, I'm going back to work." As Zhuge Mingyang's voice fell, the shadow quickly disintegrated. Lu Xingqian returned to his seat and asked, "Do you think the first prince knows about this?" Qin Feiyang said, "Is there a need to think about it? He definitely knows. Maybe it was the first prince's idea. These people are really ruthless. And the intrigue of the imperial palace is really scary. Fortunately, I didn't get involved." Lu Xingqian shook his head and smiled. "In the imperial palace, if you don't have a brain, you'll only end up as cannon fodder." Chapter 715. Cannon Fodder? Lu Xingqian pondered for a moment, then nodded. That's true. After a pause, he smiled and said, It's quite boring to cultivate every day. Why don't we go out for a stroll? Where to? Qin Feiyang asked. Lu Xingqian smiled and said, I heard that the Fragrant Moon brothel is very famous. I haven't been there for so long, so I might as well go to the Fragrant Moon brothel. Fragrant Moon brothel? Qin Feiyang muttered, his eyes flashing, and nodded. Okay, let's go to the Fragrant Moon brothel. Now that the crisis had been resolved, it was time to find the owner of the Fragrant Moon brothel and ask for the 5th grade pill fire. But just as he got up, Qin Feiyang suddenly looked straight at Lu Xingqian, a trace of surprise in his eyes. What's wrong? Lu Xingqian looked at him in confusion. Qin Feiyang frowned. Your aura is stronger than before, could it be? Lu Xingqian nodded. Yes, I have already broken through to the 4-star War Master. So fast. Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Lu Xingqian smiled. Aren't you also quite fast? How long have you been in the temple? You've already broken through to the 2-star War Master. Qin Feiyang put on a fake smile, then opened a teleportation door and took the lead to walk in. Lu Xingqian followed closely behind. The next moment, the two of them directly descended in front of the entrance of the Fragrant Moon brothel. When the two waiters standing at the door saw Qin Feiyang appear, they put on a flattering smile and said, Young Master Qin, please come in. Qin Feiyang said, Arrange a private room for me. Lu Xingqian waved his hand and smiled. What private room? Just find a place in the lobby. This Qin Feiyang frowned and nodded. All right. Seeing Qin Feiyang nod, the shop assistant smiled and said, Please follow me. Under the guidance of the waiter, the two of them arrived at a table in the middle of the hall. In the meantime, as soon as the two of them walked in, the noisy Fragrant Moon brothel immediately quieted down. All eyes were on Qin Feiyang. After the two of them were seated, the waiter asked, Young Master Qin, what would you like to order? Qin Feiyang said, Just a few dishes and 2 pots of wine will do. All right. Young masters, please wait for a moment. The waiter shouted, then turned around and ran to the kitchen. What do you mean? You clearly know that everyone in the capital knows about me, yet you still let me sit in the main hall. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Xingqian and asked through voice transmission. Lu Xingqian smiled faintly. In the private room, it's just the two of us drinking, how boring, but here look at how lively it is. Qin Feiyang looked around and saw that everyone was staring at him. He couldn't help but frown. Lu Xingqian laughed. It's not like you haven't seen the world. What are you afraid of? All right, I'll drink with you here, Qin Feiyang said helplessly. Originally, he still wanted to find the owner of the Fragrant Moon brothel, but now that everyone was watching, it was obviously impossible. Suddenly, around him, young people stood up one after another, each holding a wine glass in their hands, and walked towards Qin Feiyang. Trouble is coming. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. Brother Qin, I'm the young master of the Li family in the 2nd district. Can I have the honor of treating you to a drink? A young man in white smiled. The others also introduced themselves one after another. Qin Feiyang stood up and pointed to Lu Xingqian, smiling. Everyone, I'm sorry, this Qin is entertaining this distinguished guest. If there's a chance in the future, I'll drink with you. Distinguished guest? Everyone was stunned and looked at Lu Xingqian. Lu Xingqian touched his nose, his face twitching nonstop. When did he become a distinguished guest? The young man in white looked at Lu Xingqian, cupped his hands and smiled. May I ask how to address you, brother? To be able to become Qin Feiyang's distinguished guest, his identity was definitely not simple. Such a person had to be fawned over. Lu Xingqian smiled. I'm just a nobody, don't take it to heart. A nobody could make Qin Feiyang personally entertain him? Obviously, this person was not telling the truth. But everyone didn't continue to ask, so they turned and left resentfully. Qin Feiyang also returned to his seat, a smile at the corner of his mouth. You really have a bad heart. Lu Xingqian rolled his eyes at him. Qin Feiyang said lightly. You insisted on sitting in the lobby, who's to blame? Okay. I'll tell you the truth, in fact, I asked you to sit in the lobby because I want you to meet 2 people. Lu Xingqian transmitted his voice. Sure enough, it's not that simple. Qin Feiyang muttered and asked, Who? You'll know later. Lu Xingqian smiled mysteriously. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, So this is not the first time you've come to Fragrant Moon Brothel? Lu Xingqian said, This is the third time. Qin Feiyang looked at him meaningfully and fell silent. The waiter soon served the wine and dishes. While Qin Feiyang was drinking, his eyes were always looking around. Those who could enter Fragrant Moon Brothel were basically the children of the rich families in the capital. And these people, without exception, were all playboys who only knew how to drink and dream all day long. So, most of them had a woman sitting next to them. These women were dressed gorgeously, with heavy makeup, sexy and enchanting. They were the specially trained hostesses of Fragrant Moon Brothel. Their voices were soft and numb. Their manners were wanton. The scene was extremely erotic. There were even many women who were throwing coquettish glances at Qin Feiyang from a distance. Lu Xingqian teased, Brother Qin, seeing that you can't take your eyes off them, do you want to call one over to drink with you? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. He just wanted to see who Lu Xingqian wanted him to meet. That was all. Time flew. The sun set in the west and night fell. Ding dong. Suddenly, a melodious sound of the zither slowly rose. The sound of the zither was gentle and lingering. Then, another crisp and pleasant sound of the flute, accompanied by the sound of the zither, spread in Fragrant Moon Brothel. At this moment, everyone raised their heads and looked at the top floor of Fragrant Moon Brothel in silence. And even the people in the private rooms came out. At the same time, Lu Xingqian also put down his wine glass and looked up, with a faint smile in his eyes. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang also looked up, but he didn't see the person playing the zither and the flute at all. The sound of the zither and the flute came from two different rooms on the top floor. Brother Qin, the person I want you to meet is the person playing the zither and the flute. Lu Xingqian said with a faint smile. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Who is it? Sure. Lu Xingqian made a gesture of silence and said, Listen carefully to the sound of the zither and the flute. There is a lot of information hidden in them. A lot of information? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned, calmed down, and listened silently. The sound of the zither and the flute were very beautiful, like the sound of nature. But gradually, Qin Feiyang felt a deep sense of helplessness, despair, sadness, and a trace of desolation in the sound of the zither and the flute. What's going on? Why are there such complicated emotions mixed in? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. A moment later, Lu Xingqian suddenly retracted his gaze and said, Brother Qin, I want to give you a surprise. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was a little annoyed. Since entering the Fragrant Moon Brothel, Lu Xingqian had been keeping him in suspense. But before his voice fell, the sound of the zither and the flute disappeared. At the same time, a middle-aged woman in a red robe came out from a room on the top floor. The middle-aged woman looked at the guests below and said with a smile, Everyone, it's still the same old rules. The highest bidder wins. 100,000. 200,000. 300,000. 1 million. At that moment, everyone began to scramble to be the first to bid. Qin Feiyang looked at it strangely. Was this an auction? Lu Xingqian suddenly raised his hand and said with a smile, I bid 200 million. I want both of them. Swish. At that moment, everyone in the Fragrant Moon Brothel looked at Lu Xingqian in unison. Seeing Qin Feiyang sitting next to him, the look in their eyes changed. No one bid anymore. The middle-aged woman smiled and said, So it's the famous young Master Qin. Congratulations to the two of you. Please go upstairs. Lu Xingqian laughed. Brother Qin, this is my surprise for you. Quickly go up. Speak clearly. Qin Feiyang secretly shouted. Lu Xingqian said, As long as you go up, I don't need to say anything. You will naturally know. Qin Feiyang frowned and raised his head to look at the middle-aged woman. He leaped up and landed beside the middle-aged woman. First Prince, when Qin Feiyang knows about their current situation, you will be completely finished, just wait. Lu Xingqian muttered, a strange light flashing in his eyes. He picked up the wine pot, sat there alone, and drank by himself. The top floor. The middle-aged woman was still charming, dressed coquettishly, and exuded a strong smell of perfume. Qin Feiyang was a little disgusted. He felt that this person was like a brothel's procuress. The middle-aged woman smiled. I didn't expect young Master Qin to be a romantic person. Please follow me. Finished. The middle-aged woman turned around and walked towards a private room called Spring Pavilion. Romantic person? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and followed. Walking to the front of the Spring Pavilion, the middle-aged woman pushed open the door, then stepped aside and said with a smile, Young Master Qin, please come in. Qin Feiyang walked to the door and looked inside. This private room was very large, at least a few hundred feet, but there was no dining room, only a tea room and a bedroom. But the layout inside was quite. Qin Feiyang didn't know how to describe it. The entire floor was covered with a pink carpet. The silk curtains hanging on the wall, the bedding on the bed in the bedroom, and the bedsheets were also a brand new pink. It gave people the feeling that this was a place for indulgence. Qin Feiyang immediately realized that he had been tricked by Lu Xingchen. Seeing that Qin Feiyang didn't move, the middle-aged woman smiled. Young Master Qin, if you are not satisfied, I will get someone to redecorate for you. There is no need. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and braced himself to walk in. A faint fragrance assailed his nose. As soon as this fragrance entered his body, Qin Feiyang felt that his heart began to heat up. It was as if some kind of desire had been aroused. Qin Feiyang stood in the middle of the private room, looking around, and suddenly found an incense burner beside the bed in the bedroom. Wisps of green smoke were floating out of the incense burner, and the fragrance came from the green smoke. Chapter 7:16. Because in this incense burner, there was a kind of leaf called spring grass. This spring grass leaf, after being dried and burned in the incense burner, would emit a green smoke with a delicate fragrance. And this delicate fragrance had the effect of aphrodisiac. So, this was simply a place to indulge in debauchery. Qin Feiyang was about to flick his sleeves and leave. But at this time, the middle-aged woman smiled and said, Young Master Qin, after they bathe and change clothes, they will come to serve you. Please wait for a moment. After saying that, she directly closed the door. Qin Feiyang was angry. She had said it so straightforwardly. If he still didn't understand, then he was a fool. But just as he walked to the door and was about to slam the door and leave, he suddenly put down his arm. He knew Lu Xingchen quite well. It was impossible for him to do such a boring thing. Was he hinting at something? Or this so-called person who served him had some relationship with him? Thinking of this, he simply stayed, walked into the bedroom, extinguished the spring grass leaf in the incense burner, and then entered the tea room, sat on the chair, and looked at the closed door. Time passed breath by breath. About an hour later, Qin Feiyang was about to fall asleep, and the door finally opened. Two women in pink dresses entered the door one after another. Qin Feiyang heard the movement, rubbed his eyes and looked up. He didn't know if he didn't see, but when he saw, he suddenly stood up. His face was full of disbelief. How could it be them? Could it be that my eyes are playing tricks on me? He kept muttering in his heart, rubbed his eyes hard, and looked again. Impossible. This time, his hands suddenly clenched tightly, and a shocking anger rose in his eyes. Those two women looked very attractive. Delicate skin, broken with a flick of the finger. Two snow-white long legs, faintly visible under the pink dress, tugged at the heartstrings. Bright big eyes like a pool of autumn water. And on their faces, no makeup could be found. Everything seemed very natural. But compared to the women outside with heavy makeup, they were simply like fairies. Greetings, young Master Qin. After the two women closed the door, they walked into the tea room and bowed to Qin Feiyang. However, Qin Feiyang didn't seem to hear him and stared at the two of them. Seeing this, a sense of disgust rose in the hearts of the two women, but they concealed it very well. Young Master Qin, the night is long. It's time to rest. The two women stepped forward and pulled Qin Feiyang towards the bed. But as soon as he entered the bedroom, Qin Feiyang came back to his senses and hurriedly took 2 steps back. He stretched out his hand and said, "Wait. What happened?" The two girls looked at him in confusion. Qin Feiyang said. Tell me, what are your names? Name. The two women were stunned. One of them said, Young master can call us Shir and you er. Qin Feiyang said, I want to hear your real names. As soon as the two women heard this, they lowered their heads, and there was a faint mist in their eyes. Qin Feiyang was silent for a long time. He stepped forward, lifted their chins and looked at their faces. His eyes gradually became soft. You don't want to say your real names. Do you not want to lose face for the 14th prince? Qin Feiyang asked. Their eyes trembled, and tears suddenly burst out of their eyes. Tell me why. Why did you stay in the fragrant moon house? And why should it be placed outside like an item for those men to bid on and spoil? Qin Feiyang said. His gentle gaze became incomparably fierce. The two women didn't dare to look directly at him. They lowered their heads again and silently shed tears. Looking at the tears on their faces, Qin Feiyang's heart suddenly burst with a strong anger. He roared, Qin Yu Qin Shi, tell me why? That's right. These two women were his maids in the past. Qin Yu Qin Shi. Back then, when they were expelled from the imperial capital, the two women were already 15 or 16 years old. Over the years, their appearance didn't change much. So before, he recognized them at a glance. In the past, he had always treated them as sisters. In private, he even called them Sister Yu and Sister Shi. But he never expected that. After more than 10 years, they would meet here. And they were reduced to prostitutes in the fragrant moon house. How could this not make him angry? After a long time, Qin Shi and Qin Yu wiped their tears. Qin Yu said with a smile, Young master, this is our private matter. Please don't interfere. But the smile was very stiff. Qin Feiyang even found a trace of unconcealable pain in their eyes. Huff. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, walked into the tea room, sat down at the tea table, and said, Sit down and talk. This. The two women looked at each other, their eyes full of suspicion. Wasn't this person here to have fun? Why didn't he look like that at all? Qin Feiyang said expressionlessly, I don't want to say it a second time. The two women's delicate bodies trembled as they obediently sat across from Qin Feiyang. Looking at the two women's current appearance, Qin Feiyang was extremely distressed, and said, Tell me, why are you in the fragrant moon house? Young master. Qin Shi was about to speak. Qin Feiyang shouted, Speak. His patience was about to be worn out. The two women lowered their heads and didn't speak. Back then, the 14th prince gave you names and treated you like family. Is this how you repay him? Qin Feiyang couldn't help but slam the tea table and said angrily, We don't want to. We also know that we are discrediting His Highness by doing this. But this is the decree of the first prince. What can we do? Qin Feiyang's aggressiveness also made Qin Shi and Qin Yu angry. They glared at Qin Feiyang, their faces full of grievance and helplessness. What? The first prince? Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up. That's right. More than 10 years ago, when the 14th prince's cultivation was destroyed and he was expelled from the imperial palace, the first prince forcefully raped and defiled us. And in order to take revenge on His Highness, he even let us enter the fragrant moon house to serve those disgusting men. We have long wanted to die. But he used our family to threaten us. We had no choice. The two women hugged each other and cried bitterly. Their bodies were full of sorrow. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang's body and mind trembled. It turned out that all of this was because of him. This damn first prince, he didn't even let go of his maids. This was simply unforgivable. He lowered his head and looked at the two women, his eyes full of guilt. I'm sorry, he said silently in his heart and returned to his seat. After pondering for a moment, he said, Go and call the procuress here. The two immediately raised their heads and looked at Qin Feiyang with tears in their eyes. Go quickly. Qin Feiyang smiled. Looking at the smile on Qin Feiyang's face, the two women suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity in their hearts. Qin Yu wiped away her tears and looked at Qin Shi. Go and call the procuress. I have a few words to ask young Master Qin. Okay. Qin Shi nodded, got up and walked out of the tea room. She opened the door and walked straight out, then closed the door again. Qin Yu also retracted her gaze and looked at Qin Feiyang. She asked suspiciously, "Young master, may I ask how you know that His Highness treated us like family back then?" Qin Feiyang said, "I heard it from someone else. Not many people know about the relationship between His Highness and us. Everyone only knows that we are His Highness's maids. Young master, may I ask who you heard it from?" Qin Yu asked, her eyes somewhat vigilant. Qin Feiyang directly took out the crown prince token. "What? You are the first prince's maid?" Seeing the crown prince token, Qin Yu suddenly panicked. "Yes. But don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." Qin Feiyang smiled. Creak. At this time, the door opened. Qin Shi and the middle-aged woman walked in one after the other. Qin Feiyang also immediately put away the crown prince token. "Young master Qin, what's the matter? Is it because they didn't treat you well? Tell me, I will definitely punish them severely." As soon as the middle-aged woman came in, she came to Qin Feiyang and asked with a smile, "Don't get so close." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said in disgust. The smile on the middle-aged woman's face froze. She took a few steps back and said with a smile, "Young master." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, "Don't talk nonsense, name a price." "Name a price?" The middle-aged woman was slightly stunned. Qin Shi and Qin Yu also looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Qin Feiyang said lightly, "I want to take them away." "Take them away." The middle-aged woman was completely stunned. When she came back to her senses, she hurriedly said, "Young master, you can't do that." "Why?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Qin Yu and Qin Shi's background is not simple. Someone deliberately arranged for them to be in the Fragrant Moon brothel. And this person, neither you nor I can afford to offend. The middle-aged woman hurriedly explained. Qin Feiyang frowned. The person the middle-aged woman was talking about was obviously the first prince. But he must take Qin Yu and Qin Shi away today. Qin Feiyang's face turned cold, and he said, "Since you can't make the decision, then ask your brothel master to come." "You still want to disturb the brothel master?" Qin Yu and Qin Shi's expressions changed, and they were about to say something. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and looked at the brothel keeper. His eyes were like sharp blades, and he said, "Didn't you hear? Go and ask your brothel master to come here." Okay, I'll go right away." The brothel keeper's eyes trembled, and she quickly turned around and trotted out. "Young master, thank you for your kindness, but this matter involves too much. I hope young master won't bring trouble to yourself." Qin Yu also immediately persuaded. "It's okay. This fire can't burn me." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, took out the image crystal, and sent a message to Zhuge Mingyang. Soon, Zhuge Mingyang's shadow appeared. At the same time, Qin Feiyang, Qin Yu, and Qin Shi also appeared in front of Zhuge Mingyang. When he saw Qin Yu and Qin Shi, Zhuge Mingyang was slightly stunned, and he said with a smile, "Brother Qin, you're so carefree. You even went to the Fragrant Moon brothel." "Life is short, so I naturally have to enjoy myself." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "This time I'm looking for Brother Zhuge, because I want to trouble Brother Zhuge to tell His Highness that I want to take Qin Yu and Qin Shi away." "Take them away?" Zhuge Mingyang was stunned and said, "Do you know their identity?" "Yes. They used to be the maid of the 14th prince." Qin Feiyang nodded. Zhuge Mingyang frowned and asked in confusion, "Why do you want to take them away?" "Well, cough." Qin Feiyang coughed and said with a smile, "I like them, but the Fragrant Moon brothel won't let them go, so I can only ask the first prince." "This is not easy. I'll talk to the first prince and give you an answer later." That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.